Hello, and welcome to the Canadian Wargamer podcast. Yes, it's the Canadian Wargamer podcast featuring two affable and youngish granddads, Mike and James, talking about primarily miniature wargames and the occasional hex and counter excursion from Mike from our unique perspective in the Great White North. And as the strains of La Foy d'Arable die away, here are your hosts, Mike and James.
Let's pick our note. Yeah, I got it.
Yeah. Hey folks, welcome to episode 15 of the Canadian Wargamer podcast. It's amazing to think that we have reached 15 episodes and that people are bored enough to watch them. And we know they are because every now and then you leave us comments and we're really grateful for that. So episode 15 tonight, we are reaching across the Ontario-Quebec border to La Belle Province. And we are talking to our very good friend Pierre-Yves. And we're going to call him PY tonight. PY, welcome to the podcast.
Salut, PY.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, guys.
Bienvenue à la podcast Wargamer Canadien.
Whoa, dude! Like I used up all my French. Thanks, salut.
Yeah. So, PY, when I was in the army, I had 2 years of taxpayer-paid French. You wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know it. And every time I'd try to speak to my Quebecois colleagues in French, they would just come back to me in English, and I'd say, "Why do you do that?" And they'd say either, well, because your French hurts my ears, or because I don't have time. I don't have time to sort you out. So anyway, we're gonna do this all in English. But anyway, bienvenue, PY.
Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Yeah, we're really delighted to have you. And one of the things we want to talk about tonight is your amazing Cowboy game at HotLead. You came all the way from Montreal to Stratford, and
Yes.
when this morning when I posted on Twitter and said James and I are going to be talking to you, people were like, "Oh my God, I want to know more about that game, and I want to know more about the cool 3D stuff that you printed." So we will get to that very shortly.
Yeah. So just to be clear, this is not my game. It's John Savage from the Too Fat Lardies. So
Yeah.
I want to clear that up. I'm just part of the playtesting, so that's why.
But you brought it to.
Yeah.
You are an apostle of lard.
That's
right.
it. I
That's
am
right.
You are a servant to the Lard.
A Lard evangelist.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll get to that. We'll get to the game in a minute. Yeah, praise the Lord. We'll get to that in a minute. But first, we're going to do what we do with all of our guests, and we're just going to ask you to say a little bit about yourself, your wargaming biography, when you got started, what you like to play, who you are, just whatever you want to tell us, man.
So I'm actually French. I'm from France. I'm from Brittany. So I moved to Quebec 20 years ago now. Yeah. And so I mean, I think I started the usual route for people my age, which would be, Games Workshop would be the gateway drug at the time. So I think my first encounter with Game Workshop stuff was probably 1989 or 88.
Okay.
Stuff like, actually, mostly before that, it was Milton Bradley. They had bought some of the licenses, not both, but they produced games in conjunction with Games Workshop at the time, which were HeroQuest, obviously. And there was another game called Space Crusade. I don't know if you're familiar with it. It's like a board game with Space Marines, and there's a bunch of orcs and Gretchens, and so it was a bit like 40K, but contained in a box, and we used to play this a lot with my cousin, and I must have been like 12 at the time, something like that. So that's really what got me into the kind of wargaming stuff. I've always been a fan of fantasy, and I had some. I played a little bit of D&D very early, probably around 10, and yeah, that's it. And after that, I got into Warhammer back in '92, and also what else? Epic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
Epic was a great game.
But I mean, when I say got into, I bought the box set,
Mhm.
and I
That's
had nobody else to play with.
oh bummer.
You know, I lived in a rural area, so we'd
Yeah.
go to the big city, every whatever 6 months. And there used to be that shop, like would sell Games Workshop stuff. There was no official Games Workshop in France at the time, or maybe in Paris, but
Right.
I was living, in a rural area. So I would buy random stuff. Basically, I had no idea what I would buy, and eventually, either managed to play it with my little brother or just forget about it. But I wasn't very much into the miniatures, so I didn't mind too much not playing. But and it was a great time. White Dwarf also was quite popular at the time, so you could find it at your local news agent. So that's my early stuff, I'd say. I also always had a fascination with Blood Bowl as a kid for some reason. Never had the game, but that came back later in my life. So I mean, I pretty much stopped any kind of wargaming around 94, 95 maybe. And then I got into like the TCGs, like Magic the Gathering and video games, etc. I've always had computers at home because my dad was a big electrical engineer or electronic engineer, and so I always had that part of always exposed to computers in my life, which kind of made me what I am today, in a way. So there was basically I got more into the partying, I guess, at the end of the '90s than the wargaming. And then in '99 I moved to Ireland and moved there for 3 years, and then ended up in Quebec in 2002. And then in the late 2000s, I got back into the miniature stuff. Through Blood Bowl again. So I started collecting originally, and then I met one guy, which is a good friend of mine now, which is called Dan Chaput, which was supposed to come with me at HotLead, but got some COVID. His girlfriend got COVID, so he couldn't make it, unfortunately. And I met him at a tournament he organized. He used to organize every year a Blood Bowl tournament called Death Ball. And so that gave me the taste of mini painting and collecting and all that again. And I did that for a few years, and then I lost it again. And back in 2018, finally, I got back into D&D for some reason. I can't remember why. I think I wanted to run some D&Ds with the guys at work. And that got me back into the miniatures, and I started to build sceneries for the different D&D adventures we would be making. And eventually started to get on Twitter. That's when I started tweeting a lot about D&D stuff. I was also doing a lot of drawing, map drawing, stuff like that. And eventually I saw some post about some Old West game that Jeff on Twitter posted at the time, and that just hooked me up. And I was like, "Oh my god, this is amazing! I need to get into this." And then everything started from there. So I eventually got into. So I bought a few Old West figures, and then I discovered bolt action.
Mm-hmm.
And the historical side really was appealing to me more and more. I have family who was in the two wars, so there's some things I can relate to in a way. And So got into bolt action, played a bit of bolt action with some guys around, and eventually discovered the Lardies and the rule sets. And I got hooked instantly. I think part of it was the rules, part of it was the characters and the people who play the Lardie games, because I think they're just in for a laugh, which I particularly enjoy.
Yeah.
I'm not a very competitive player. I don't really care if I win or lose. So that really fit my my style of play. So
I like how they're, yeah, like you point out the Lardies, is that their ethos is very much sort of, we're here for fun and to have a laugh, but they're also taking the history very seriously
yes,
too,
absolutely.
which you often see very separated. You know, like guys that are heavily into the history, it's like these rules are so serious, and you know, oh my god. And then you get the silly games, you know, which are just like almost there's so much going for the laugh that they're almost disrespectful, which is kind of, you know, whereas yeah, like Richard Clark and the other Lardies seem to strike that nice balance.
Absolutely. And yeah, I like the historical accuracy and the recreating history in a way. I mean, not recreating it exactly, but recreating the situation and seeing what happens, you know, because sometimes luck is involved. And that's where things like variable movement in the Lardie games feels like very realistic to me, because
Yes,
you know, you step in a hole, you twist your ankle, you know, tons of things can happen on the battlefield. So
yep.
I think the rules are really good for that. So yeah, so I started with Chain of Command, and that's when I met my other good gaming buddy, which is John. John de Terre-Neuve. He's not on Twitter, but he's very active on Facebook.
Okay. Yep.
And he also has a blog like that's been running for a long time now. And John is based in Boston, but he's from Newfoundland originally. And he does make the trip to Montreal quite often because he's got family here, and he loves the Montreal Canadiens. So that's when I met him, really. So he would drive here. He actually used to play also Saga at the time, so he was playing with some other people, and then I met him to the Lardie. I think there's like there's a locator for other Lardies on the Lardie forum, and I think I was, you know, asking on the forum, is there anybody in Montreal, blah blah, and I think John raised his hand and said, yeah, I can play with you. And we've been playing so many campaigns with him. So, and we still play every week together, whether it's in person or through Zoom or Discord. So
That's enviable.
Yeah, he's we've got some good stuff going on here. And when the pandemic hit, that's when we really started obviously playing remotely. We used to only play every 3 months or every 2 months. And then the pandemic hit and we got, you know, proper setup with cameras in both of our wargaming rooms, if you will. And then that's when I started into getting into Back the Hun, which is you would think is not that easy to play remotely, but given the proper visual aids, yeah, it's quite good to play. So I printed these big white arrows to show the directions of the plane, as well as, you know, big numbers for the altitude. And it played really well. And we played at least a dozen games for the Battle of Britain, and then we moved on to the list of different games. We've played some Kiss Me Hardy recently, Chart Practice. What else have we played? We also played some Muskets and Tomahawk. It's not a Lardie game, but it's
okay. You can talk about it.
Yeah, it's a board game, James. Close your ears.
No, it's a war game as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's French Indian Wars. Now they came out with Napoleonic, like more like it's called the other one is called Bayonets and Shackles, I think.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah,
I just saw a review of it.
and yeah, so that's another good one we played. We also played some naval World War II stuff with General Quarters 3, which is
how do you like
another rule
those?
set I would recommend. It looks daunting at first, but it's actually super simple. And
Okay.
it's D12 based, but it's great. I remember playing it outside at the beginning of the pandemic because my other friend Dan came here to play, and it was COVID, so we said, okay, we'll move the table outside. It was summer, so it was nice, but it's a very simple game to set up, and there's quite a lot of rules for like night fighting and torpedoes and
yes, I'm just starting to get into World War II naval, so I'm interested in rules.
yeah.
So General Quarters 3 is fairly straightforward.
Yeah, it's actually quite easy to grasp. It's a bit like the rule book is only downloadable, I think.
Yeah, Wargamer's Vault, I think.
Yeah, and but it's well worth it. They have lists for every single ship of the Second World War, and it's very easy to set up, very easy to yeah.
Yeah, if only James had someone to print ships for him.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I know. Who could that be?
I don't know. Sorry, PY, when you said Tomahawks, I thought you were talking about this game. I don't know if
Interesting. Okay.
I don't know if you know it. It's the GMT game Bayonets and Tomahawks.
No. It's very similar, obviously, in the name. So
it's got Tomahawks in it. Yeah.
Yeah, everything's this and that.
That's right. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's pretty much on the list of games. I played some Judge Dredd also from Warlord game recently, which I think it's quite fun. I like Judge Dredd, the comics. So
okay,
and I like this type of game because they've come up with like a deck of cards that's really flavorful in terms of like the all the stuff you find in the comic can be introduced with like special cards and things like that. So I quite like the game. It's a very simple game to grasp, and I printed tons of stuff for like sci-fi. Basically cities and there's lots of good stuff up there for.
Yeah, you're not from your Wild West town, you're not shy of printing large objects.
No, I've printed my fair share of filament. I'm not sure exactly how many kilometers, but I think it's probably close to 10 by now. So
yeah,
wow.
I mean, it goes pretty fast, but I don't know how many rolls of filament I bought across my life, but over my life. But my wife keeps complaining every time she sees boxes of filament coming in.
Yeah, I feel the same way about bottles of resin, PY. I haven't bought an FDM printer yet, but it's once you start going, it's all consuming. We'll get to that in a minute. I just wanted to come back to. I mean, your story is really interesting because it kind of matches some of the stories we've heard from people. I mean, James and I think we kind of call ourselves the Airfix generation, right? We're maybe a couple of decades earlier in terms of when we started, but your story is really similar, James, to some of the people we talked to, like Evans, right? About coming to
a Warhammer generation.
We didn't have Airfix back then when I was, as a kid, and maybe they still had it in Britain, probably. But I don't think it was ever very popular in France either. So, but I remember playing with plastic soldiers. Probably one of the first war game I played, which was big rocks, a lot of plastic soldiers, and marbles to try to knock them out.
Yeah, we all.
We
all did that.
And you discovered dice.
Yeah.
Yeah, my son and I once went to when he was about 13. We found one of these bulk barn stores, bulk food stores. They sold these gummy green army men, right? With the classic like army men poses. And so we bought like 2 dozen of them. We had a rule where, you know, if you could kill somebody, you got to eat their soldiers. So that was,
Nice.
yeah, those are good games. You know, lots of gruesome head biting and stuff. Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask about the LardEh stuff. So, are you you must be aware of the Frozen Lard group on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're part of that, right?
Yeah, I'm part of that. I'm
Yeah.
not very active
Is
on
there any
Facebook,
chance?
but
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there is a pretty small but um, pretty dedicated Lard community in Canada, and we're actually as part of this podcast, probably before we go to, you know, Friday night or so before we wrap it up and I start editing it, we're going to talk to Chris Robinson about the Lard Day coming up in Hamilton. Yeah. Is there any chance we're going to see you there?
it's tricky because with the with my wargaming space renovation.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm quite busy, and it's gonna be maybe a hard pill to swallow for my wife. So
Yeah.
but I'll try to make it in the autumn one.
Yeah, there will be a fall one for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would wish I could go, but I think it's gonna be a bit too much.
Well, as we used to say in the army, the boss is always right, and the boss is domestic niner. You know, the wife. So yeah, you happy wife, happy life, indeed. What do I'm just trying to think what we had sort of an agenda. I wanted to just ask you a little bit, PY, about how you see yourself, because whether you see yourself more as a gamer, more as a painter, more as a collector, and I'm just going to put you on the spot here just for a second. I'm going to share my screen for the folks who are watching this on YouTube. So I found out you have this really cool blog. And I have to say I was super impressed by some of your paintings. So right now I'm looking at some of your chindits that you did, and you've got very detailed paint schemes.
I haven't updated that site for like probably a year now.
Well, it's amazing. Like there's some very cool like diorama style painting. Like look at these Japanese soldiers here. Oh my goodness! And the vehicle behind it.
Yeah, so the vehicle is a resin print. I think it's originally a 1/100 scale vehicle, scale to 28 mil. So it's a bit rough on once you scale it, but it did the job at the time. So I've got a lot of Pacific stuff. I have more World War II Pacific figures and terrain than anything else for some reason. I now have full Japanese Army Chindits and US Marines.
That's very cool.
So I'm looking at maybe doing the Brits next.
You've just been doing a campaign with the Marines.
Yes. I did the campaign before I completed the Marines Army. So the figures were actually US Airbornes during the play when we played the campaign. But at the end of the day, you have to finish the project, you know. And
so your enthusiasm for something is always when your stuff's half painted. By the time you get everything painted and you can finally do the game that you've had in your mind, you're done.
Yeah, that's it.
You're on to playing something else now.
Absolutely.
One of the ironies of wargaming, I think.
You mean we'll never actually finish anything, is what you're saying?
That too.
I don't know if that just filled me with despair or not.
It's just a happy adventure.
I'm trying to finish the pile of lead. I haven't bought anything this year. Well, I bought something at HotLead. That's the only thing I bought, but it was from that chap who was doing a estate sale.
Yeah.
I just bought some like ancient stuff because I'm doing Infamy next. So
right.
Even though I don't really need it, you know. But I think that's all I bought in terms of figures. So I'm pretty.
It's very restrained. Yeah.
I was amazed. I didn't buy any figures at HotLead. I bought terrain and books, but I didn't buy anything.
Sexy trees.
Yes, big sexy trees.
Yeah, we've heard about these.
Yeah.
I just happened to buy some of Mike Barrett's figures.
Oh,
So,
that's good.
well, it's just Mike, right? And he's practically giving them away. God bless him.
Oh yeah.
So, PY, I just wanted to ask you, like, one of the things we've talked about in past is how the hobby makes you or invites you to divide your time, right? Like some people
Yeah.
see themselves as collectors, some people see themselves mostly as gamers, where they just have to paint figures as the price of playing a game.
Mhm.
Other people, like, their joy comes mostly from painting. Or we talked to a fellow a couple of shows back who really loves doing scenery,
Mhm.
Joe Saunders,
Yeah.
and although he's a pretty creative painter in his own right. So where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself as being like a little bit of everything, or what gives you the most joy?
I think the what gives me the most joy is probably seeing everything come together in a game, like the scenery that you make or print and paint, and then all the figures painted. And I love photography. I love taking pictures of small stuff.
Mhm.
I used to be into bird photography at a
Okay.
point in my life.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I just love to take pictures which look great. Basically, like I love backdrops on the photos. I take a lot of photos of game table. I try to always have a backdrop. I
Yeah.
just want the thing to be immersive and.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think I get a lot of joy of a bit of everything. I get as much joy when I play a game or run a game. I don't mind. I actually sometimes prefer running the game because uh, I don't know. I like that. I like that for some reason. Maybe more than playing the game.
Hmm.
Maybe because I get to put all my stuff on the table and run it for the people, which.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's.
Oh, I can certainly sympathize with that. Yeah.
But I don't have a preference. Obviously, I like painting, but sometimes I hate painting. When you're painting your 100th figure for your army, you're kind of, oh my god.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
you're experimenting with different technique. My last army, I tried a different technique. Usually, I do batches, like small batches of 10 maybe.
Hmm.
But this time I said, okay, I'm gonna block everything at once. So I started by blocking all the skin for 80 something figures in one go. And then
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
moved on to the boots, and then I moved on to the weapons. So
I bet
in
that.
hindsight, I think it was pretty good. I think I'd do it again this way.
Really?
Yeah, but then what I did is after color blocking, I went back to batches of 10 for like the basically shading and highlighting.
Okay.
And because I think it's nice to see a final product before you've done 80 figures or 100 figures.
You get a
So
sense of accomplishment.
yeah, that's it. But the blocking part anyway is boring to me. So I'd rather get it done in one go, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I always get frustrated with these people on social media who say, I painted like a whole regiment in like 2 days, and I'm like, no, how could you do that? I struggle to do, like, I'm working on a 30 figure unit right now, a 7 years war unit, and I've been working on it all through March, and I'm almost at the finish line, but I'm like, and I've
Uh,
almost run out of patience to do it, right? But
it's not too
yeah,
bad.
yeah,
I haven't painted anything for the last 2 weeks, I think so, or maybe like an ancient figure.
yeah.
That's about it.
Well, you're renovating a games room, so
Well,
Yeah,
there,
yeah, but yeah,
well, and it helps that you've got other interests, right? Like you can work on scenery one day, you can do 3D printing one day, you can,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, play a game with a friend online. Yeah, that's all. It
Yeah,
all.
I think these days I play more than I produce any or paint
Oh,
anything, but
yeah,
that's all
it's gonna
right.
come back eventually.
yeah.
So
And
yeah.
sometimes I get haunted by the sense like I spend so much time painting and hardly any time playing. Like, what's the point, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
am I just a collector at that point? Yeah,
Ah, yeah, I see. I
yeah.
see. Yeah.
Um,
I enjoy it all coming together.
Yeah.
Even if it's just the cat on the table.
Yeah.
yeah,
You and Luigi enjoy
Yeah.
how it looks.
that's right. Yeah, he enjoys eating things. Yeah, Yeah. And it does take a certain amount of nerve to actually say, you know what, I've got a game. I'm going to take it to a convention. I'm going to let other people play it. I'm going to run it. I'm going to be doing that for, I think, the first time in years in at the end of May. And, everything on the table is going to be mine. It's all going to be painted by me. And, that takes a certain amount of nerve, I think, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
the best way to finish stuff as well. Like
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well,
Anyway.
I always the advice I was given by an experienced game master was to never commit to a game if you don't have everything already done.
Oh,
Because as sure as death and taxes, life will get in the way and you won't finish those units that you need done.
Yeah. But it's also good to be under pressure, I think.
Yeah, I guess it depends on your response to your response to pressure.
Yeah.
Some of us just seize up, and other people, it's
For me, it's
move ahead.
I'll find a way. And I'll be much more productive. If I'm under pressure, for sure.
Really?
Well, let's talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to share my screen here, and just bear with me.
There I am, pinned down in the alley.
Yeah.
So I wanted to show, and again, this will only make sense if you're watching the YouTube video. So I'm just going to put up some pictures of the game that you brought to HotLead, PY.
Mhm.
So this was the What a Cowboy game that you were doing.
Right.
So here you've got that's not you lying dead there, is it, James? That's not you lying dead there, is it?
No, I'm the orange base with the red cross beside it because I'm pinned down and wounded.
So this is part of your What a Cowboy game, PY, and all of this stuff I understand you printed yourself.
Yeah. So except for the rock on the left, which is these are molds from Woodland Scenics that are used to make the rocks.
Yeah.
Every other building is 3D printed. The pig pen is actually a design of mine, except for the pigs.
Yeah.
And
the cinder blocks are a nice touch.
Yeah, except they're kind of out of. I don't think they exist. They started being widely accessible to people around the 1950s. So sometimes I get comments when I put it in World War II games. But I'll put some tuft on top or like some lichen so that they don't show up. But and then there's the thing on the lower right, chicken coop, which is also another 3D model I made. It's always
that's nice. Have you got chickens for it yet?
I think I have I have chickens somewhere. Like I have the Warlord animal set. That's there must be somewhere in my pile of stuff, which is has been stored behind me.
That pig pen makes me think of the pig pen in Deadwood. You know, the one where Ian McShane's character made the bodies disappear. You know, And then what else did I want to show? I wanted to show because a lot of people I think are going to like this. So these are the character sheets, the player aids that you designed.
What? And we're not seeing anything, Mike.
Oh, you're not? Okay, hang on.
Like right now, yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna try it again. Derp. I used to be pretty adept at. What about that? Can you see that?
There we go.
There we go.
Yeah. So this is for the folks who are just listening to us. These are the two player aids that you made, and all of this I understand is 3D printed. And you've got to keep track of the ammunition. You've got the cylinders of two revolvers, and then you've got these orange cartridges.
Yeah, so they're basically orange because I didn't have time to paint them. But at the end of the day, it's bright and easy to see. So that's
I've got another shot
quite well.
I've got another shot of it here. If you can see that, there's the orange cartridge.
Open it up.
Oh.
Yeah, so there's a version for the Winchester and then a version for the shotgun. I think I will have to produce one with a 5-bullet barrel, because I think there might be a weapon in the rules that has 5 bullets, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah, for the show, I didn't need that because I used the base weapons in the game.
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think a lot of people.
Fun thing to do. It took me. I burned a few rolls of filament to test the fit on many of these. But,
Yeah.
But that's all your design.
Yeah. So I use several pieces of software for this. There's Tinkercad if you want to do simple stuff. But as soon as you've got patterns like circular patterns or things that are a bit more complex, I tend to go through. I tend to use Fusion 360, which is from Autodesk.
Oh, yes.
Free license, basically, if you're just a hobbyist. So, and it's way more powerful. So,
have you got a background in design or CAD PY, or is this just something you're self-taught?
Yeah, it's mostly self-taught. I'm a software engineer by trade. So, but with I mostly do what we call user experience related stuff. So a lot of visual stuff.
Okay, so graphics and art and everything. It's still, you're still very tuned into that.
That's it. Yeah, I've always been drawing all my life and using computers and yeah. So I've had this artistic side. So that helps me a little bit.
Because I've noticed that in all the things I've seen, following you on Twitter and Facebook, and and then playing your game in person is just how clean and like the good graphic sense you have.
Yeah.
Layout and design is one of the trickiest things to learn, I think.
Yeah. Like when I first saw your picture you put up of your old West, when you first started doing the Old West stuff, and it was just like a house and a rock and a cactus and then this bright blue sky with clouds behind it in the backdrop, and I was like,
with the Mexicans,
wow. Yeah, that looks like we're right there. And then and then you probably use the same backdrop for your Marines landing on an island.
Absolutely,
it's like we're right there and we're in the Pacific. It's so great.
Exactly. So one thing I wanted to ask you about, going back to your Cowboy game PY, is the figures. So I got one of the screenshots open for.
No, you don't.
No, I don't.
No, gotta double click on it, man.
Probably on the other screen.
Click and open.
Let me try it again. Can you see it
now?
There
we go.
Yeah. So all of the scenery is printed, but what about the figures? Are these figures printed as well, PY?
No, these are all metal figures. Mostly artisan design. I have some foundry in there and some other brand. I can't remember. The foundry are a bit smaller, so I typically use them for civilians because this game can have civilians also.
Right.
But there's not much, unfortunately. There's not many models for the Old West available to buy and print.
Right.
At the moment,
there's a lot of Old West figures out there. So
yes, absolutely. The range is huge. So
now there's plastic.
Yeah. The gunfighters from what's their name?
Great Escape Games.
Yeah,
like those female gunfighters that are just being released.
Yeah, that's their second box.
Kind of an odd box art. All these chicks and guns shooting at each other.
I know. Like,
what's that all about?
Wow, the Women's Institute meeting got really ugly in that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Don't like my pie, will you?
That's right. You think your crust is better, bitch?
I think figures are a bit trickier to. It's resin is good, but it's quite brittle, so it would be. I'm not sure how well they would stand the playtime.
Yeah, and I was just, the reason I was asking whether the figures are printed is because I don't think we've seen yet a game, at least not a HotLead anyway. I'm sure there are games out there where everything on the table was 3D printed, but I think we're going to get to that point fairly soon.
Yeah,
I think you're right. There's been some nice figures coming out like that. The chappie that's doing some really nice Napoleonic figures. Like
Oh yeah, yeah,
Duchy of Warsaw and the Baden.
yeah. Or the Caballero figure,
Yeah,
like the
his Normans are gorgeous.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit about this with previous guests, PY, about where they see 3D printing and in terms of the future of our hobby. Where do you see it? I mean, you're really adept at FDM printing, and I know that one of the guys at the club that I belong to in Barrie does large, like 28 millimeter buildings. All his buildings are done by FDM, and they look really really good. So it's obviously going to be huge going forward. Where do you see the future of 3D printing in the hobby?
Um, so regarding FDM, we're like I think we're at a very mature state in terms of the technology and the actual access to models in terms of historical wargaming. I mean, there's a lot of stuff available, and I think what's gonna happen is there's gonna be more competition in terms of like the the type of models you can buy and the scenery, and we're starting to see redundancy in some of the areas like like your Normandy buildings or whatever. There used to be only like a few Kickstarters and or very limited companies, small companies doing particular things. Like the first buildings I printed were the Old West ones, I think. And at the time, I think there was only a company called Printable Sceneries doing them.
Mm-hmm.
But I think now there's been at least 3 Kickstarters, plus there's companies like Corvus Gaming doing them. There's, I'm sure there's plenty of other companies doing them. So you have a lot more choice. And I also think the price tend to go down. I mean, the Kickstarters used to be pretty pricey. I mean, I think they were pricey and there were less stuff. Now you could still get the same price for some of the Kickstarters, like especially from so there's a guy in Germany who does a 3D print, who's called 3D Print Terrain.
Yes. Yeah,
And then there's a guy in Britain, I think, who's doing WoW buildings.
Mm-hmm.
And now Kickstarters tend to include a lot more stuff for the same price. So
yeah.
so I think it's just going to be more competition, lower model costs, faster print times. I mean, the printers are getting better and better. I just bought my second FDM printer this year, and it's so much quieter than my original printer. I have a Prusa MK2, which I used to hear from like it was in my basement and I could hear it in my bedroom, I think. But now the new one, we play in the same, when we play games in the garage, the printer is next to the table and we can actually chat and we barely hear it. So these are really good improvements. And it's also so much a lot faster. Print quality is so much better.
Yeah. And I guess it depends too on the scale you're working on.
Yeah. Obviously, mostly buildings. I do have a resin printer as well, which I'll use for smaller stuff, obviously. But I don't use it as often as the FDM, I have to say.
Yeah.
And resin is quite a pain to deal with.
It is.
And it's also harmful, so you have to be super careful. But it's nice. I did print figures like for Judge Dredd. I printed a bunch of fatties, which are very large characters in Judge Dredd. So because I didn't want to pay the price for the box of Warlords, which I thought was not really Well, it was quite expensive for 3
Oh.
figures, so I was like, oh, whatever. I'll just buy the models from that guy who made great models and printed them, and yeah, they did the job. And so I think for resin, the future is gonna be mostly like the workflow, maybe an easier way to not have to spend as much time curing and cleaning, and better material which are more resistant to shock. Because if you drop a resin figure on the floor, you can bet it's going to be in multiple pieces at the moment. I know there's flexible, probably more flexible resin once they get cured, but I'm not too sure. I don't dabble with like this type of specialty resins, but I think that's probably going to be the answer to the biggest problem, in my opinion, which is it's very weak.
Yeah.
FDM is great. You can drop a building on the floor and it will.
Oh, they're indestructible. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I took the plunge to resin printing about just at the new year, and I have to say I still struggle with why I do it. I mean, in part it's so I can make warships for my friend James.
Mhm.
Great.
But,
That's why you got the printer.
Well, that's exactly why I got it. But like these guys, right? So
Yeah.
these are Bacchus lead 6mm, very traditional old school figures, right?
Yeah.
And so I send off to Bacchus. I buy like 3 or 4 bags of whatever I need, like Bavarian cavalry. I have them. A month later, one night I can prime them, scrape them, get them ready to paint, and they're done. But if I want to print like 66mm figures, that's actually a lot of work. I've got to print them, I've got to clean them, I've got to cure them, I've got to hope that my printer behaves. I'm still not convinced that it's the future, but it's part of the future.
Yeah.
I think certainly not for, maybe not for like 6mm mass army stuff.
Yeah, yeah. But I have seen people like our friend James J. Arnold, the veteran wargamer. He printed like in pretty much a week, like 2 frickin' 10 mil fantasy armies.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
like, and I was just gobsmacked. Like, how do you do that, mate? Because that's a lot of work to run that many figures through a resin printer. That's a lot of work.
Well, you have to remember that you can bulk print quite a lot with a resin
Well,
printer.
that's true. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Well, he's also an army first sergeant, so he probably yelled at the printers.
Oh, I exactly. Yeah.
And they just did it.
Yeah, they did. Yeah.
Like they did not screw up on them.
No, they did not. Yeah.
And I've seen like recently, there's a guy in France whose company is called Esquisse Miniatures. He's on
yes.
Wargaming.
I have some of his stuff. He's great.
Yeah, he's on Wargaming 3D, and he recently posted a video on YouTube where he explained how he prints like I don't know 100 figures at once on his resin printer, and he basically just he does multiple layers.
Oh, okay.
Figures with support, so in between the layers.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, I mean that's an efficient way of doing it.
Yeah.
But then it's all the cleanup. I mean,
yeah.
The supports. I mean, yeah, supports not too bad, but usually, the issue is like failures and things like that. And
yeah. I consider it a good day's work if I can get 30 figures onto the build plate, run it overnight, say a prayer before I go to bed, come down in the morning and find, they've all printed,
Yeah.
Whereas often there's some sort of horrible, grotesque abomination.
Well, there's so many parameters involved, like the type of resin, the exposure.
Anyway, it's its own hobby for sure, but I don't think it's not going away. I think, and it's interesting.
Oh, no.
Yeah. It's interesting how that's been a thread in our conversations ever since James and I started this podcast. So,
well, it's the new thing, and and I'm sure there will be clever people who figure it out, and they buy the licensing or whatever, and they'll do print on demand.
Yeah.
Oh, that's already
just like you download a rule book, you take it to Staples, and they print it and bind it for you for a fee. I download some STLs and I take it to YP's print on demand, and say, I want, 100 figure, and you figure out how to stack them up in your printer or whatever, and say, okay, come back next week.
Mm-hmm.
And I come back and there's a box of stuff, and I was like, cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You figure out, the cost of your time and your resin and your isopropanol,
And then you give it to your painting service because
Yeah.
you don't have time to paint it. And then you give it to your gaming service because you don't have time to game with it.
Yeah, that's
And they
it.
just tell you how much fun they had playing with it. And
so
you
that's
think,
the Elon Musk school of wargaming. Just outsource everything.
outsource everything. Yeah, gaming in space. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about going back to What a Cowboy. We went down the 3D rabbit hole.
Mhm.
Why did you choose that game? And tell us the story about how you built that, like how you chose that. Because I have to say it was the one game that everybody at HotLead was talking about, and it was the one
Yes.
game that I really wish I'd played in. So
Well,
tell us the story about how you chose that, how you kind of found out about the rules, and whatever you want to tell us about it.
yeah. So we have to go back to I think the pandemic because so the author John Savage. I happened to meet him because I participated in the virtual Lards
Right.
event that ran through COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I must have done like 4 or 5. I can't remember how many virtual Lards there were, but so I did originally just participated, and I think then I ran games in all the subsequent one, and I also got involved with Jeremy, which was the organizer, to simplify his life because it was getting so big at some point that he had issues with like assigning games to people. So I basically wrote a piece of software which basically everybody was given a link at 12 o'clock on the week before, and the first to register that priority on everybody else. But it was basically a Google form. You'd pick your games and your slots, and then the software would assign you games based on your choices, type of rule set you chose if you couldn't get your first choice, etc.
I set an alert on my phone so I'd know when it opened. And I went and found a little corner above my, in the factory where I got a little trickle of Wi-Fi. And I'm up there filling it out.
It's like,
okay, I got to go back.
Did you get the game you wanted?
I did. I got both games. It was great.
You're like that guy trying to get concert tickets.
Yeah.
Exactly. 2 minute window where they go online. Yeah, before they're all sold
Well, I
out.
think we had rarely anybody unhappy with the choices. I think we had like a 95% fill rate on most events. So it went pretty well. So I ended up meeting John because after virtual Lards, there's the pub, the virtual pub, and
yeah, doesn't sound like a lot of fun, really.
Where I drank a lot and chatted a lot with all the Lardies. And I also played in John's games when he was doing a lot of Infamy at the time, because it was the new kid on the block. And I think John must have mentioned it during the pub sessions, and I had already figures, a bit of the buildings, blah blah. So eventually, I just sent him a message on Twitter, I believe, and I said, "Hey, John, if you're looking for playtesters, blah blah, I have what I need to playtest the game, blah blah." And John said, "Yeah, sure, no problem." So I was invited to the group and started receiving rules update every week. Sometimes I think I got an update the day before HotLead.
Yes.
On the Friday night or the Thursday night, I can't remember. So John is still polishing the rules as we speak today, but I think it's fairly close. And so I got to play test it. So what we did is there is a campaign as part of the rule set, and John was more focused on the one-time games at that time. And so John de Terreneuve and I started playing a campaign, and then we started giving a lot of feedback about what was working and what was not. And yeah, that's how it went. To fulfill all the scenarios, I produced more terrain, more figures, and that's how I basically ended up with all the stuff I have today. And yeah, so we're still I haven't played it since HotLead because everything's packed. It's still
I haven't played
in the box
anything
that I
since HotLead either, so
and but then yeah, a few weeks or months before HotLead, I was thinking about the tracking, because we used to do it on loose sheets of paper and with dice in different spots, and it's always kind of the stuff you forget, you know, flipping a dice to remove ammo. It's like sometimes you're carried away in the action and you don't think about it.
yeah.
So I said, yeah, it could be fun maybe to have barrels and things like that. And that's where I came up with this idea. So yeah, I spent a few weeks trying to design this, and that's it. But yeah, the game is very promising. The game is really fun. The campaign is really fun, and yeah, and there is an element of evolution of your posse as you fight different games against each other, upgrades, skills, weapons. It's really nice. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the final version of the rules, like everybody else. But I believe it's gonna be this summer, from what I've heard from. I mean, John has now created a Facebook group for the public to talk about, and I think he's mentioned summer, but could be wrong.
Yeah, so it's not out yet.
No.
Because I know a few people were asking on Twitter today, where do I get these? Where do I find this game? And I think,
yeah,
said, well, we're going to ask our guest tonight, but my sense was that it's not quite out yet. So
it's not quite out yet. You can reach out to John Savage. He might let you run the game. I know he allowed our good friend Keith Burnett to run it at LardEh. So you know,
that's pretty exciting. Well,
Yeah.
Keith's a great game master. So
yeah, and it's good for a game to have exposure. So I think that's also the reasoning behind John's decision to let it be played at conventions or small events. Like,
well, and there's for LardEh people, there's another game which I played at a virtual Lard called Packing Heat.
Yes,
which is
right.
Small man-to-man shootout version of Sharp Practice, which is
I'm very excited about that.
I'd rather go that way, you know.
Yeah, Johan did run it quite a lot during the virtual Lard. I never tried it myself, so
yeah.
But I've got gangsters, so I really want to get in that one.
John hasn't finished What a Cowboy, but I know he's gonna come up with something else next.
Well,
What a Cartel.
Can you guys see this?
I saw it today or yesterday.
Yes.
So this is on John's Twitter feed. So he's got the Copplestone gangsters down here, and he's thinking about a What a Cowboy adaptation for.
Would work perfectly.
Yeah. So there you go. That you know, James does some great gangster games, but.
Yeah, I've heard. And
well, I try.
Yeah,
they look good. The games are crap, but they look good.
Well, the games are, you know, just basically, that's the thing about those games, right? It's like you've got like 6 players, 6 factions. You know, you're gonna get shot by somebody when you least expect it, and you know, it's just shoot them before you shoot you, basically.
Yeah, and it's just trying to manage the chaos and give people reasons to move around the board and interact with each other.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
there's politics involved, I guess.
Well, not really, because there's no point in talking to anybody. They'll just shoot you, right? It's like, no, let's talk. Let's go. Oh, anyway.
Well, yeah, I've thought about trying to put some Monopoly money into the game and people can bribe and stuff. But
yeah, well,
yeah.
Well, that's really, really cool, and that I mean, it was such a successful game at HotLead. I hope I get a chance to play it the next time you're around. I wanted
Absolutely.
to just ask you a little bit about the gaming scene in Quebec. Now, um, is there, for example, is there something in Montreal or Quebec City equivalent to HotLead, or is there, or, or,
Um,
or, or is it just basically you and your online friends in your basement?
I can't say for sure, but in Montreal, most of the action I see is mostly in stores, like or so there's big stores with big room spaces,
Okay.
like the Abyss, and there's another
Yeah.
place that opened in Laval, I think, recently. Unfortunately, I don't go very much to these places because I've got everything at home, and I'm usually running the games
Hmm.
from
Yeah.
here. But I know there's the Quebec scene is quite active in historical stuff. I see a lot of uh, meets. They meet quite frequently in like uh, these pubs where you can also play games.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so that seems to be the trend. As far as the events, like things like HotLead, I don't think there's anything really. I mean, I think there's Comic-Con in Montreal, but I mean, it's a it's not very miniature oriented. I mean, there will be some, but other than that, unfortunately, we don't have any kind of historical miniature type events here, which
Hmm.
is something I was thinking about, to maybe to run some type of event, but obviously it's not simple. But I will be contacting you the day I really want to get into it.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, unfortunately, playing from home and everything, I don't have much exposure to the wargaming scene that could be outside of my place. I do look up quite frequently online if I can find new groups or new Facebook groups, maybe things like that. The thing is, you look for Montreal wargaming and you don't find much really. And I certainly don't know any other LardEh in Montreal.
Mm.
So I know there's a couple of Quebec players who've been dabbling with the LardEh games. But in Montreal, it's like very quiet.
Mm.
There's guys in Vermont, in Burlington,
Okay.
which they have a group there, and I think they play mostly in Binshot Mam.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, and probably some people in Ottawa as well. But
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
There's a
Montreal is kind of dead. But I'm saying this, and I might be wrong. So if ever a Montreal LardEh is listening to this, please get in contact with me,
yeah.
and I will be happy to play with you.
Well, and we
So
would say
yeah,
the same if you are listening to this in Quebec and you want to get in touch with us and tell us more, please do. We would love to hear from you.
absolutely. I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, and there's plenty of stuff
Yeah,
going on. But as
yeah.
far as I can see, I don't. Yeah, I can't find anything really on my end. So
Well, that's the Canadian scene, right? It's just like small networks of people
yeah.
who happen to got in touch with each other. Whereas every time I listen to a British wargaming podcast, they would say, "Oh yeah, I went down to the pub and so went to the club in Upper Wilmington,"
Yeah.
and it's like, oh, lucky you, you buggers.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Kind of
Yeah.
a paradox because we
For,
have a lot of room in Canada. They don't
yeah.
have real estate is very
yeah,
you
yeah,
would think it's much harder to get for a club in the UK. Still, they make it. I guess it's because this building have been
yeah,
occupied for so long by these
yeah,
groups.
and they have these funny community halls and
Yeah,
whatnot.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's something that's a bit frustrating here. Is you don't have any public spaces that are available for people to rent or whatever, like for smaller fees, if you will.
not
Like
really. No.
like in France, every town has its has a hall that can be
Yeah.
rented by anybody from the town and to organize things. That's you would think that it could really bring a lot more life to your town or city, and I mean bring people together. But
You would think people
yeah,
keep trying to do that, except they keep getting monetized.
yeah,
They keep getting bought out, bulldozed over, and made into some profit thing.
yeah. Mm.
So,
Boo. Oh well.
well,
We did talk to the folks in Vancouver, the trumpeter group that rent space from I think it's like community service organization Lions or Kiwanis or something, and then the guys in Hamilton, Barnaby Orr's group rent from like a veterans group, but
Yeah.
they tend to be few and far between. Yeah, yeah.
And yeah, I don't know what kind of agreement they're with them, but yeah, it's not cheap like the spaces. So
No.
yeah, you have to find a good group that's ready to. I mean, you need membership money like to run this kind of places. You need people to be willing to pay, like, I don't know, like 20, 40, whatever amount, depending on the amount of members. But
Or you need a rich friend who can buy.
That's it. Who buys the whole place?
That's what we ought to do, James. We ought to pressure Walter or some deep pocketed friend of ours into like buying a space.
oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. When I win the lottery, okay,
When you win the lottery.
I'll make the wargaming center. It'll be great.
Yeah. I've pretty much run out of things I wanted to ask you.
What's
what
what's
about
next
James?
for YP?
Yeah, tell us what's next. What's your next project? That's right. That was on the list.
Okay, so currently,
What do you want to do next?
I am currently trying to paint Germanics for Infamy.
Ooh.
I've assembled these 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah. The Victrix Germans?
Yes, I really like the Victrix ones.
Oh, those are great figures, aren't they?
Yeah, they're amazing.
Yeah,
So I have some Romans that are also assembled and ready to paint. And then I've got still in the bags, I've got the goals, and I also have a few Warlord figures for some of the stuff that Victrix doesn't make. So, but the scale is kind of off, so it's kind of difficult to use them. And after that, I mean, I always wanted to get into ducks Britanniarum.
Oh,
so
as opposed to the birds.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so that could be an option, but I have tons of figures to paint. I have a British Airborne Force to paint. I have Fall Schirmjägers to paint. But at some point, I have to go back to Europe and do the early war or something like the Esquisse miniature guy as a whole French army.
Oh, and they are really nice figures. They are.
Yeah, I painted a batch of them just to test, and yeah, cool. And my granddad used to be fought in 1940, so I have some ideas for scenarios like.
Well, and I just love the French tanks.
Yeah,
from the 19 like they are just so gorgeous. Like just the lines and the camouflage schemes. It's just very, I don't know, Art Deco. they're just beautiful looking. Okay, the one man turrets are very inefficient, but who cares? They look good.
Yeah.
They don't need to be efficient.
So yeah, that's it. I also have more Old West buildings that I've printed recently and I've not painted, like some.
Because you need a bigger town.
Yes, actually, I want to go back to the desert. I think I'm gonna do like Mexican villages and things like that.
Yeah.
Like I really love, like, there's a Phil on Twitter who's been pushing a lot of pictures of these Mexican town buildings that.
Right. Yeah.
and I find them amazing, and they're so simple to do. Like, so I really like the look of this stuff.
Yeah. And Nick Skinner's been doing a really interesting project, sort of set in the Alamo period, right?
Yeah.
You know, which is really that's a great period because you've got the Old West,
Mhm.
but you've also got Napoleonic uniforms for the Mexicans, so you've got a little bit of everything.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Yeah, that's great.
I'll have to get into shop practice also at some point. So.
Well, you have to, right?
Yeah.
Because every gamer eventually ends up with Napoleonics, right?
But
Yeah.
my friend John Doterno has everything, so I mean,
It's good to have a friend like that.
he used to have 3,000 Napoleonic figures. He tells me, but painted.
Oh, just a couple.
Just a couple. That's all you need, really. 3,000.
But
Couple
he only kept a few to run skirmish games, and
Oh, you got tired of doing the big battles,
yeah, I think so. So
and in a few years you're gonna go, damn it, I want to play a big battle again. I'm sick of these skirmishes.
well, I'll do 6 mils.
Yeah, you'll have to do it all.
I don't think I'll ever get into big battles. I'll do 28 mil skirmishes. That's quite 28 mil is my scale. Like,
Well, let me tell you, I started with just this like nice limited, 28 mil sharp practice project. It was just going to be very finite, it would be great, right? And then my friend says, well, this is terrific. Here's some Prussians. And it's like, oh, well, now I've got a division of Prussians. Okay, fine. So I've got to build an in-house opponent for them. So I end up doing a division of Bavarians. And then he says, here's a Russian army that I don't want to paint. And it's like, okay, so this isn't a skirmish project anymore. Like that's the thing with Napoleonics, right? You think you can control it. And then the little guy in the hat just shows up and goes, hey, here I am. Right? And you're throwing your shako in the air and shouting Vive l'Empereur and off you go.
That's right, yeah. The next it's like 4 PM, you're charging a British square going, what the hell am I doing?
That's right.
Well, I don't know how well you guys can see this, but this is my plea here to consider the small scale. So I've got 3 brigades just on the table here. Although depending upon the scale of the battle, you could call that 3 corps. Anyway, and it didn't take that long to do. Anyway, and I've also got the giant cat of doom on the table now. So
of course, Luigi's got to get into the
Luigi, the cat beast of Mordor. Yeah. It's funny. I going back to the Germanics. JY, have you actually had a chance to try Infamy yet?
Yeah, I've tried it during virtual Lards. I think I played 2 games, and I think I played the Germanics in one of them. So
yeah,
I really love the asymmetric aspect of this rule set.
He captures it very well, doesn't he?
Yeah. And which brings me to an idea I've always wanted to do, which is a set of rules for commando actions.
Okay.
And it will be a nice segue to your book section because.
Oh yeah.
But I think so. Let's talk about the book because when I got into historical wargaming, I started reading more books about the subject, and I read this book from let me get the name right. It's called Churchill's Secret Warriors: The Explosive True Story of the Special Forces Desperados of World War II. So it's a story of the small unit of guys that basically do commando action on different objectives, like an airfield in Crete or a boat in the middle of the coast of Africa. And so I think this is the kind of rule set that could be interesting, but it's also very hard to put in place because it's all about stealth.
Yeah.
Which is not really very hardly achievable in wargaming rules. But so I've always had that on the back of my mind. I take note when I have ideas, but it's very it's a subject I would love very much to dabble into, but
Yeah, Black Ops has some interesting ideas about stealth and sort of as you're doing things, you kind of accumulate noise
Oh yeah.
noise
Don't tell
markers.
me too much because I don't want to be influenced by other
Oh,
rules.
okay, sorry, just trying to give you ideas.
But yeah, because if I read a rule set, I might just say, oh yeah, that's obvious. That's the way you should do it. But sometimes it's better not to know what exists, so you can come up with a mechanism that's original. And
Yeah, but yeah, like
anyway,
lines or different deployment.
yeah, like. And I thought maybe this game should only be a co-op game, like that you play along someone and the enemy force is kind of automated in some way. But I always wanted to keep it paper. I don't want to involve like computers or apps, or I think, yeah. Anyway, that's.
Oh, sorry, that book, Churchill Secret Warriors, was that the one by Damian Lewis?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Okay, so that was, yeah, we got into the part of the podcast where we ask our guests to recommend a couple of books for our digital library, and that is totally stolen from the God's Own Skill podcast. So, yeah,
Yeah.
thanks, Sean. We totally stole that idea from you, buddy. So yeah, that's a great recommendation. Did you have another one for us?
Yeah. The other one is Behind Japanese Lines. By what's his name? Richard Dunlop. So Behind Japanese Line with the OSS in Burma. So it's really
Sensing a theme here.
Yeah. So I got obsessed with Burma for some reason. And yeah, I built like an half jungle to fill up a 6x4 table.
That's maybe enough.
And I have my Chindit force, which is complete. My Japanese, I can. That's really a subject I really liked. I mean, these guys that did rough, the Chindits. It's crazy what they went through, and the stories you hear are amazing. Like it's really something else. And so yeah, that's a brilliant book. And yeah, highly recommend it.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
Have you read Quartered Safe Out Here? George MacDonald Fraser's memoirs of being with the 14th Army?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you should try and find it and read it. It's one of the best. Well, of course, Fraser's a great novelist, and he brings that to his own memoirs, and so it's one of the best war memoirs out there. And people who've read a lot of war memoirs have said that too. So it's not just me, although my opinion is very important. So yeah,
usually wrong, but
I would recommend Quartered Safe Out Here just to add to your Burma reading.
Sounds good. Yeah, look into it for sure. Yeah.
We had a guest 2 episodes back, a Canadian guy called Sean Taylor from Victoria, who has written a set of rules for miniatures about the Secret War, OSS. I forget the exact title of it, but they're interesting. And when I wish I could think of it, I'm just trying to look for it on my computer. He very kindly gave me a copy, and I looked at it and I thought, oh, this is super cool, and I can't find it, but I will. I'll send you the details on it, JY, afterwards, because it might give you, some ideas. I don't think it's a well-known set of rules, but Sean's an interesting guy, and
yeah, I mean, yeah, it's very it's a very cinematic, like this type of actions I think would work really well on the table, like destroying planes on an airfield, and
or just
raiding a lighthouse, or
landing secret agents behind the lines, moonlight or whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's so cool.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, this has been a great conversation.
It's a pleasure for me to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm starting to think about the time. It's getting on, but also very much aware of what James said about how you don't end the conversation right away because something cool always comes up.
Yeah, we've lost a few good things that he stops recording and then we keep chatting, and then people say some really interesting things. It's like, damn it, that should have been in the interview.
Yeah, yeah.
I get it. But I'm hoping to have my garage completed in time so I can resume my wargaming operations.
What will your garage look like when it's finished? Will it be like a full gaming room?
I hope so. I'm putting the effort into making it like a wargamer's dream. If
Right,
you
right.
So a lounge, not a garage.
Yeah, so I'm getting rid of the industrial heating on the ceiling for some concrete heated floor. I'm gonna have them polished as well, so they're nice and shiny. And then
Oh, nice.
a lot of storage all over around the room.
Yeah.
Proper spaces for 3D printing stuff, and yeah, that's it. A properly finished place, because I've been it's been a dirty and cold place for too long. So
Well, I have a great idea, JY. You need to get that finished, and then you could open like the Quebec Holiday War Games Holiday Center.
Yeah.
yes.
And then you could have your friends
Sure,
from.
my wife would be delighted.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm always impressed by those British holiday centers that you have.
Yeah, they look really interesting.
Yeah. I just don't think that would ever succeed in Canada, I don't think, unless you wanted to blow all your retirement money in 1 year.
Yeah. Well, I toyed around with it. Thought like, oh, you run it like a bed and breakfast.
Yeah.
Right? And then there's also wargaming, and then there's like, and I was thinking, hey, then you could write off your figures as a business expense.
There you go.
Right? Am I right?
Yeah, I think so.
Thinking here,
I'm not an accountant, but I think it's got legs. Yeah.
Yeah, but then Elizabeth and I realized the whole problem with running a bed and breakfast is basically you are killing your weekends and your summer.
Right.
Right.
And you have to be nice to people that you might not really like.
Yeah.
Who probably don't like the way you boil eggs or something. So
yeah. Because what were we saying earlier? People annoy me and I hate them.
Yeah. Well, no, people are stupid and they make me angry. Yeah.
Yeah. People are stupid and they make me angry. Which is very appropriate.
It's the motto of the podcast, basically. Yeah. Yeah.
No, it's not.
Okay. Yeah. No, actually, somebody who could pull this off, our friend Kurt Campbell from Regina, who we interviewed very early on in the life of the podcast and is the host of the Analog Hobbies Painting Contest. He actually built an amazing, like a 30 by 40 building in the back of his house. And it's like a dedicated war games lair, and it's amazing. And he's I think Kurt, if you're looking for a retirement project when you finish the archive work and for the government of Saskatchewan, you could open up like the Prairies War Games Holiday Center, and yeah, because Regina's a nice place to visit.
Sure.
When it's not winter.
You just need to convince your other half then to come.
Well, yeah, his other half. Yeah, she's lovely. The lovely lady Sarah. Well,
give people a reason to stop in Regina, though.
Well, there's I suppose Regina's nice. When I lived in the Prairies, it was like the place you either went. If you want to go to the big city, you either went to Calgary or you went to Regina. So there you go. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Such a big country.
Yeah, it is a big country.
We got a lot of rocks and hills and trees and.
Yeah. How many hours did it take you to drive to Stratford?
On the way in, about 8, I think.
8. Yeah.
Okay.
I was a bit quicker on the way back, but
caught a tailwind.
Sorry?
You caught a tailwind?
Yeah, and I stopped less with the charging the car.
Oh.
I managed to do it with 2 stops on the way back, and Yeah, it was nice. I actually talked to Jeff and Geoff Bond on the way back. They were on Discord on the LardEh's Discord server, so
Oh, okay.
we had a nice long chat, and yeah, it was fun.
Cool.
And traffic was inexistent in Toronto because we were on Sundays. So I mean, inexistent. It was
Always nice to have an easy drive through Toronto, because Toronto is an hour from Toronto.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So good. But no, overall it was great. Yeah.
People down at this end of the world, they're terrified of having to drive to Toronto, and they plan their trips to sort of, okay, we've got to leave by this time so that we get through Toronto before rush hour. Rush hour lasts about 3 hours, or we're going to leave at this time so that we're there after rush hour, which means it's like, well, now we're driving through at 9 o'clock at night. And ow.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like everybody west of Hamilton is terrified of Toronto.
I can understand why.
Yeah.
So I was looking at the dates for next year's HotLead, and I was looking at booking my hotel, but I think they changed the policy, right? You can no longer book and cancel if you can't make it. So if you book, you have to pay straight away. Right now,
are you booking directly with the hotel, or are you booking?
I was trying on the online sites.
Okay, call the hotel directly and book.
Okay, because I also use the Best Western.
Yeah, that's yeah,
okay. So you can do it through the hotel. Okay, so I'll do it because for me it's like a bit of a gamble sometimes.
Yeah, book directly with the front desk.
Okay.
That makes sense.
I will say.
Although I'm sure we could find you somebody who would take your hotel room.
So there's our top tip for our listeners in Radioland.
Yeah, absolutely.
When coming to HotLead, which everybody should try and come to.
Even
our listeners in Ireland and Spain and Norway, we'd be happy to see you.
That's right. Yeah. Come from away, y'all. Yeah.
That's right.
All right. Well, before we slide into any other terrible regional accents, that's probably a good way to finish it. So
we'll just tell them to pile their coats and boots in the hall and tell them to sit in the kitchen.
That's right. Yeah. Well, PY, thanks so much for joining us. This has been great, and you've been a lovely guest. Yeah. We look forward to maybe having you back down the road and hearing what you're working on.
Definitely come by next year.
You can be the Canadian Wargamer podcast correspondent in Quebec.
Absolutely, we're searching for LardEhs and more. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, that's a great place to end it. James, you and I are going to get together with Chris probably Friday night. I'm thinking. Does Friday night work for you?
Yeah.
And we'll just do a little bit of an update with Chris on the next LardEh day. So Chris, he actually did an interview with Nick Skinner on the Oddcast, and I hope he straightened them out about LardEh, because I noticed when I was listening to them the last podcast, Skinner and Sid and Rich, they were I think one of them said it was Sydney said LardEh, and I was like,
yeah. They didn't get it. Yeah.
You don't understand.
We have to throw a toque at them.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Poutine, yeah, that's right.
Or just like, sit them down and force them to watch, like a couple hours of Bob and Doug McKenzie.
Yeah. That's something we actually didn't talk about tonight. We didn't talk about poutine. And why you shouldn't eat it.
The food, I hope you meant the food, yeah. No, poutine is an acquired taste. I mean,
it is.
When I moved here, I could not understand why people would eat it, but now I have been converted.
Oh, you have been converted?
Okay. I love it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something you have to eat a few times before you appreciate it, I think.
Like an English cooked breakfast, like.
Okay. That's not a recommendation. But you are living in the home of poutine.
Right? Well, technically, the home of poutine is in between Quebec and Montreal. It's the area of
You're adjacent.
Drummondville and Victoriaville. These are the two towns fighting for the right to say they invented the poutine.
Oh,
Well, you're within a comfortable drive.
Yeah.
Home of poutine, where like down here in Southern Ontario, where it's like Oktoberfest sausages, and schnitzel pie.
Yeah.
It's just sort of what's this? It's just gravy and fries and yeah. So I don't know, you can get a good poutine down here.
There's lots of different ways of making poutine, but yeah, you'll find your own poutine one day.
no, never.
Okay. I think I like mine with the malt vinegar and no gravy and cheese on my French fries. Thank you.
Heretic.
Yeah. I took my son to a place here in Barrie called Smokes Poutine. It's a bit of a chain in Southern Ontario, and it's a very kind of like a specialty store where there's different kinds of it. And I think we both tried the butter chicken poutine, really, but it's just a glob of butter chicken, and then once you eat the butter chicken, you've just basically got nasty fries and gravy underneath it. And
more of a classic.
Why not just eat butter chicken? Really,
yeah.
Yeah. No, I don't put anything in my poutine except for chicken.
Mm-hmm.
That's like chicken from like a rotisserie chicken. But yeah, I'm not big into mixing things. Not meant to be in a poutine.
Okay. On that note, it's funny. I've kind of lost my appetite for a midnight snack now. I think.
Diet.
I'm just gonna go to bed. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. All right.
That late yet? No. Okay.
Well, it's late for me. I'm an old man. All right, chaps. That's been great. I think we'll wrap it up here.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just gonna end the recording. There's just a lot of nonsense on that recording. Well, that is, of course, the Maple Leaf Forever, the old national anthem of the Old Dominion, and it marks the start of the Canadian Content Corner. That's the part of the podcast where James and I just have a bit of a natter about Canadian military history, about Canadian gaming, or just general Johnny Canuck stuff that makes us darn proud to have maple syrup coursing through our veins. And so as the Maple Leaf Forever, played by Her Majesty's Irish Guards, dies away, here is the Canadian Content Corner. Yeah. So this is the Canadian Content Corner, and tonight on
Totally,
totally. And tonight on the Canadian Content Corner, we have like a real Canadian, and he's like in front of the podcast, And so he's Chris Robinson, and Chris. Hey, Chris, welcome.
Good day, Chris.
It's nice. Good to be back.
Yeah, you're like a regular co-star on this, so but don't expect to share the royalties.
Okay, just a frequent guest star.
Frequent guest star. There you go.
Yeah. Recurring character.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, recurring character. Non-player character. Player. I don't know. Anyway, so we asked you on tonight because today is May 1st. When we are recording the second half of the podcast that we recorded, we started recording almost a week ago, because that's how it works. And you are one of the masterminds, along with our dear friend Barnaby, of LardEh, which is coming up at the end of May. And you have an exciting story of a brush with wargaming celebrity fame, because you talked to Big Rich himself, LardEh Actual, for their Oddcast. So without further ado, first of all, Chris, what was it like talking to the big guy?
Oh, it was pretty straightforward. I mean, there were no marquee or anything like that. It was just Rich and I, just after lunch his time and just after breakfast my time, one day just before I had to get busy for work, and we just chatted. we remain chatting about our LardEh days here in Canada, and just bit of an update there for them. And we're, as we talked about last time I was on for a bit, we as far as we know, we're the only one in Canada that happened. So we were talking about that, and
Nice.
I'd been I'd been pestering him or talking to him, I guess, since 2020 when we had that initial plan in the spring of 2020 to have a LardEh's sort of corner at Broadsword in Hamilton that went up in COVID smoke. And so I've sort of been, every so often you get the random email from me telling me what an update of our plans was, and so we've gotten a lot more traction now. We've had our first event. I was actually supposed to do some recording at the event, like others have done at their LardEh days, and gotten that over to them. But between just not having the mental capacity on the day of it to remember to do it, plus a lot of people are having reunions essentially at that convention. I didn't really want to pull people away from what they were doing to going off in a corner with me to record something. So I didn't get that done, but I've been talking to them again this winter, just updating them what we have another one coming, and hopefully another one in the fall. And so he invited me on to talk about that, and it went broadened into a sort of a conversation about wargaming in Canada.
Way to represent.
And I treaded water as best as I could. I suspect I may get some hate mail from Western Canada and Eastern Canada, because I apologize in advance, because I probably sound like the Laurentian Elite just talking about Toronto and Ottawa and Southern Ontario, but I don't know about what happened really in those other places, so I didn't speculate. But I talked about just what our gaming scene is like, and I think we're generally sort of follow the sort of the American model for wargaming, with a bit of the British. There are some groups that do have their halls that they meet at, like the Hamilton crowd. So that was about it. And I made the obligatory invitation to Rich to try to get him or Nick or Sid over sometime for something, whether it's one of these days or HotLead or something. It'd be good to have them over. Promise them that most of our money has look familiar if they turn it to the flip side for them and all that. So see if it happens someday.
Did you get them sorted out on LardEh?
Yeah, I did hear that podcast where they went through a lot of iterations of it. I didn't get into it with Rich. He was he wasn't he was I don't know if he even said the name, but
no.
I kept up with our pronunciation. So
I think I cringed a little bit on their last Oddcast when Sydney Roundwood pronounced it LardEh, I think.
Yeah. Well, I hope, because he said it reasonably correctly later, so I think he was perhaps spelling it out for everyone else who has no idea of that particular in joke.
Yeah.
So
because if you say it quickly, you just think it's a funny pronunciation of LARDY.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And it's not like there aren't any other weird Lard convention names. So
no, not at all. They're all very staid and respectable.
Yeah. How many games have you got locked in so far, Chris?
I'll have to probably count out loud here, because we've had some changes. But I think we have Chain of Command, Infamy, Grand Darmet or General Darmet.
Will be me.
My sharp practice game, ACW, I'll do that twice, so I'll count it just one for now. Roger's doing 1812 again with a sharp practice. We have What a Tanker in Malaya, a 15mm game of Chain of Command Gothic science fiction style, and why am I missing one?
Chain of Command Gothic science fiction style. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, I think it's a homebrew conversion of some Horsehair Safe 40K sort of action with some other figures. I don't know where they're from, but
other figures.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. I should have written out
what
it
you're
was.
Up to
now.
At least 10 there.
Yeah, and it's a pretty broad suite of games too. So as usual. So
nice selection.
Be something for everyone.
That's exciting.
I think Howard's doing his What a Tanker game, and he's just trying to cycle through that the whole game. So anyone,
Yeah.
it'll sort of be probably almost like the drop-in game there for those who don't get there for anything else. It'll probably start something new every hour and a half or so as the first round of tanks go. And I think it's Malaya, so there'll be Japanese tanks. So I think some of them will probably be going with fairly regular frequency. I don't know what they'll be up against. Maybe Stewart. So
I hope it's Stewart's, because putting them up against Matildas or Grants would just be evil.
Yeah.
No, I think you should play it where the Japanese player has just a bunch of guys with bicycles, and they hear the British all hear the squeaky bicycles and think that they're tanks, and they all run away. I think that would be, yeah. Then I'm sure that I've heard stories about that. It just so happens I had coffee on Saturday with Howard up in Aurelia because Mike Manning introduced us and said, well, Howard, he just lives up the road from you. You should go get to know him. That was my Mike Manning impression. And
that's pretty bad.
Well, no, actually, it's a pretty good impression of Mike Manning. You just sound like James Mason. And I've known Mike since the early 90s, so I can hope I
get away with it. Yeah.
But yeah, he's a lovely guy, and we were doing that usual kind of thing where wargamers meet each other the first time. It's kind of like dogs sniffing each other. We kind of walk around, and, like what scale, what rules, what do you do, what do you like? And then Howard mentioned that he was doing a What a Tanker game, and I was like, well, that's very cool. So yeah, that's exciting.
Is that who you were playing DBA with the other night?
No, but it turns out that was a guy called Charles who belongs to the Berry Group, but it turns out that Howard knows Charles really well because Howard has been running DBA tournaments at HotLead for years.
Yeah.
And every time I went to HotLead, I saw all the DBA guys in the corner. It was kind of like a chess tournament, right?
Yeah.
Two guys hunched over this little tiny thing, playing with a few pieces, and it's not a spectator sport.
No.
So I was like none the wiser, but anyway. We'll save that for a later part of the podcast because I'm kind of curious about it all now. Anyway, that's very exciting, and Rich was very kind enough to mail me 60 of the red Lard dice, which we are going to be selling at. We're going to be selling at LardEh in Hamilton on the 28th. I think the price we agreed on is $2 $2 per die, and all of the proceeds are going to go towards the McMaster Children's Hospital Foundation. I think I got that right.
Yep, that's right.
Yeah. And that was inspired by what the American LardEh crew did for one of our own, one of their own, Andrew France, whose son Owen is recovering nicely from initial treatment for leukemia. So he's a brave little guy. He's, I think he's 6 years old, and he's gotten a bunch of cards and things from various people. And I kind of got to thinking afterwards, well, we should maybe do something similar, if not necessarily for Owen, because I talked to Andrew. And he said they're actually plugged into the local university hospital, which has a special funding for treating, children. And American healthcare, as you guys all know, is pretty precarious, right? It's how much can you afford?
Yeah, even if you got insurance, it's scary.
Yeah, and Andrew said, no, we're good. But if you guys want to do something in the spirit of that, then you could. So Chris and Barnaby and I talked, and it seems like a good thing to do.
Yep. And we'll have a raffle as well that will support the same cause, and it's one that'll be it's one that is pretty close to the local Hamilton players' hearts too, and that's one that they through the regular club activities, that's one they often donate to as well when they have a chance to do some fundraising.
Yeah, and there'll be a couple of raffle items donated by this podcast. So yeah, well, that's all very exciting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think we'll have the usual sort of generally for everyone who's been or who hasn't been, it'll be a pretty casual day there. We'll have a morning session, a time slot that about 9:30 to 1:30, about an hour and a half for lunch. We'll get going again at 3, run till 7, and then whoever wants to stay will probably order in some curry or other dinner of your choice. But most of us will go for sort of the Lardies option and get some curry in and wrap up the evening with that. And it's at the Royal Hamilton Light Infantry Veterans Association Hall in Hamilton, Ontario.
Way out in the East End.
Yep.
Yeah.
And probably the best way to find us would be on Facebook, would be through the Frozen Lard group, and then from there we'd invite you to the private event page that sort of keeps everyone who's coming up to date.
Very cool. I'll make sure there's a link to that in the pod notes when we put it up on Podbean. So yeah.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you, Chris. That's awesome. We look forward to seeing you at the end of May, and I will get you the particulars of my game as soon as I finish figuring them out. So
Okay, that's good. That's what I'm going to be heading back to, is basing what I need to get ready for my game. So
Yeah. One of these
the
days,
panic has started.
one of these days, I'm going to be confident enough to bring Beg the Hun for you.
That would be cool, James.
Yeah.
Why don't you do it at the end of May?
Well, I've got the grandchildren here the week before,
Oh, right.
so I'm not sure if the day is we're just going to be too tired,
Okay.
or we're going to be scrambling around catching up on stuff that didn't get done while grandchildren are visiting. You know, like groceries and laundry and all that fun time.
Oh.
So that's why I'm being very non-committal about my attendance.
As a fellow member of the League of Wargaming Granddads, I think I absolve you.
Oh, thank you, Father.
Good excuse. So yeah, bless you, my son. You're off the hook. Next year, because you have cool toys.
Oh, in the fall.
Yeah.
Have you nailed down the date for the fall one yet?
Not yet, other than
there's
one of those
three-
late Saturdays. Yeah, in
Three
October.
potentials in
Yeah.
October. Yeah. Okay. I've got them all marked on my
Okay.
phone. So
Excellent. Yeah.
Cool.
I have my vote. I just need to see whether or not Barnaby agrees with me, and then we'll land on it.
you know, if the venue's available.
Yeah.
So
We look
Cool.
forward to more. We look forward to hearing more, buddy.
All right.
All right.
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Thanks for joining us.
Right. Take care.
All right,
Bye-bye.
talk to you
hi, Chris.
soon. See you in Hamilton.
Mhm.
All right. Well, that's enough of that.
That's pretty good Canadian content corner.
That is very good Canadian content corner. Oh, actually, I have some more Canadian content.
Oh, what?
Yeah. So I wanted to do a little bit of show and tell while we're here.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Because
hold
we're
up-
now on the YouTubes.
now on the YouTube. So I'm going to hold up a book. It's called Building the Army's Backbone, Canadian Non-Commissioned Officers in the Second World War. And I'm going to hold this up because
Ooh.
my lovely wife, Joy,
I'm getting yelled at by it already.
oh, she looked at this guy and said, "Who is Mr. Handsome Pants?" He is a random sergeant so this is a book by a Canadian academic, Lieutenant Colonel Andrew Brown. He's an assistant professor of history at the Royal Military College of Canada, and I bought this at a UBC press sale, and it's not like it's not something that wargamers necessarily would get a lot out of directly. Like there's no accounts of actions, but what it does is it tells you what it was like to build an army from scratch for the Canadians.
And we were building an army from scratch. Like
We were, and you and I know how difficult it is to get loaded on courses, and how courses sometimes come up when you can least do them, and what a pain it is, and so forth. And because you and I both worked in training, right?
Mhm.
You do work in training. That's what the cadet
That's right.
corps does.
That's my command.
Yeah, that's your command. And imagine what it's like in wartime. So, for example, this book has tons of information about how, as the Canadian Army expanded. So, for example, in 1942, I think it was, the National Defense authorized the creation of a second Canadian Army Corps. And that meant that they had to get NCOs stripped out of units that were preparing for Italy and training in Britain. And they had to send them back to Canada as trainers.
Right.
And, you can imagine how unpopular that was with, battalion commanders who were like, you want my best NCO and you want to send him back to Canada for, 6 months, 8 months, just as we're getting ready to take part in, the invasion of Italy.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of shenanigans about people sending back, they're less than stripping their units of duds rather than, you know,
That's a
and
fine tradition. I mean, look at the old airborne regiment, right?
yeah, yeah. And there's a lot of fascinating stuff about what training was like. And this is interesting for me because my father went through this whole system. He started the war as a buck private with no military experience. He had no time in the NPAM, the non-permanent active militia. He just joined as a ranked civilian. He was promoted to corporal pretty quickly in the Royal Montreal Rifles just because he knew how to do a little bit of drill. Made sergeant several times during the war, and was busted for various shenanigans, and that was not uncommon because the Canadian Army spent a lot of time in Britain, and they all got bored, and people
Well,
did.
and they were civilians in uniform.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
the idea of the professional ethos wasn't really, it's like, well, we're here to go fight Nazis. Other than that, it's all bullshit.
yeah, exactly. They weren't professional soldiers. They weren't that interested in being lectured by people like General Simmons. They just thought he was a wanker, and you know,
Yeah.
they just had their job. I thought I'd just maybe read a little paragraph from this because this is kind of cool. This is just his introduction to his section on demographics, which is really interesting. He's surveyed several hundred NCOs, that he could get their service records for. So, Company Sergeant Major Alexander Connolly, typical Canadian NCO of the Second World War, resident of Toronto, Ontario, spoke English, attended the Anglican Church. He came to the Army with partial secondary education, having left school after grade 10. He was an apprentice steam fitter. He had little experience in the MPAM, having served as a local infantry unit from 1933 to 34. Enlisted in the active army July 1940 at 24 years of age, which was actually typical for a lot of NCOs. They were in their mid-20s when the war started. So he joined the Lincoln and Welland Regiment, known as the Lynx, or sometimes the Lynx and Winks. Spent 2 years as a private, was promoted to corporal July 1942. A week later, he reported to the Junior Leaders School at Megantic, Quebec to learn how to be an NCO. Attended several training programs that gave him specialist instructional skills, including courses in driving, platoon weapons, urban combat. March 1943, he has 33 months in the Army by then. He earns his sergeant stripes. He skipped over the appointment of Lance Sergeant, which is a rank that doesn't exist anymore. Gets to France in July 1944, started fighting. Mid-August, he suffers a gunshot wound to the chest. So he goes back to Britain, spends 2 months in hospital, returns to the continent where he actually rejoins his unit, which was not always the case because once you got into the reinforcement stream, you might be sent to another unit.
Yeah, whoever needed you.
Yeah, whoever needed you. And so he came back as a reinforcement who had battle experience and knew people who were still serving in the links. He got promoted to Warrant Officer Class 2, Company Sergeant Major within a month. And 1st March 1945, he's 29 years old, died of wounds received in action. So,
Huh.
yeah.
So
So,
so close to the end.
so close to the end, yeah. And he's kind of like a typical Canadian Army NCO. He learns his trade. A lot of it is on courses. And he's typical in that 42% of the NCO Corps had some high school. And that was about it.
Yeah. So being a little bit older and having some high school is probably what got them
Yeah,
tagged as being potential NCOs.
yeah,
A bit of
exactly.
maturity and education.
And then I thought, just for fun, I'll finish this part. I just thought you might be interested, our readers might be interested in knowing what the training looked like. So this is the 3-week syllabus for the Junior Leaders School at Megantic, Quebec in September 1941. This is where our guy Connolly was. So these are the subjects. 14 periods on the attack, 19 periods on defense and protection. Bear in mind this is a 3-week course. 2 on discipline, 12 on drill. So bear in mind this is preparing NCOs who are going to be training other people, right? So you're training the trainers. 3 on examinations. I'm not really sure what that would mean. I guess, can you verify that somebody has a skill? Four periods on exercises, 15 on field craft, 6 on field defenses, 1 on gas, which tells you they weren't that worried about gas by then, 1 on loading platoon truck, 14 on map reading, 12 on patrols, 3 on quick decision making, 4 on reconnaissance, appreciation, and order. So I guess that would be, small party taskings, we'd call it today. 5 on rifle fire control. 2 on supply and medical arrangements, and 1 on village fighting. So that's 120 periods over 3 weeks. So probably pretty busy. It probably wasn't, probably weren't a lot of days when they were just like, you know, falling asleep during PowerPoints.
Oh, no, thank God.
Yeah. So I don't know what you make of all that, except,
Oh, you know, I mean, take out the stuff about weapons handling and attack and defense. It sounds like cadets.
yeah.
You know, 14 periods on field craft and you know, another 14 periods on map and compass, and
Yeah.
you know, decision making and small party taskings. That's all what we teaching cadets too.
Yeah. And the point he makes in the book is that by the time the Canadian Army started forming in England, and a lot of the senior NCOs were sent home just because they couldn't keep up with it. The schedule of route marches and you know, physical training was really, really intense, probably even intense by today's standards. So a lot of these older guys were combed out. You know, Montgomery, when he was overseeing, I think, the 1st Canadian Division as part of his command, was pretty ruthless. You know, he'd tour the lines and he'd complain about all these old sergeants and warrant officers. And a lot of these guys were just sent home to Canada, where they found very useful billets as trainers. And as a result, a lot of the sergeants and warrant officers that went into action in Italy and France were, you know, fairly new on the job. They weren't. It'd be interesting just ask Colonel Brown whether he thought, you know, man for man, our NCOs were as good as the Germans, or, you know, because I mean, they had less battle experience. A German NCO probably in Normandy probably had, or Italy probably had a year or 2 on the Western Front, Eastern Front. Right?
Yeah.
You know, but was their NCO training any better than ours? That would be an interesting question.
Yeah, I mean, and they certainly grasp the, you know, delegating to lower levels of command and you know, encouraging lower level initiative to keep the unit on mission, which, yeah, Americans and British Canadian were getting, but not sure if we were doing it quite as well as the Germans were.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think every army probably adjusts its training once it goes from, you know, the barracks and the classroom to the actual battlefield, right? I'm sure that's going on in Ukraine right now.
Oh yeah.
And I'm sure that the NATO instructors are probably adjusting their training in light of, you know, what they're hearing from the guys they were training and who are now fighting. So,
well, goodness knows now, you know, nowadays, like, you know, you can just stay connected with your phones, and your former student is, you know, sending you Twitter messages from the front line going, oh, hey, you know, that thing you taught us doesn't really work. You should like put this spin on it in your next course.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, I've heard that from friends of mine who were training Ukrainians, for sure, that they're regularly getting messages on Facebook and stuff. So yeah. Well, my friends, that's the Canadian Content Corner, and we're going to move on to the closing part of the podcast where James and I just natter about stuff.
Yeah.
What do you want to natter about tonight, James?
Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to War Bases.
Okay,
because our faithful listeners will remember that I enthused about my sexy Bavarian supply wagons, which were in a game on my blog at the beginning of the year.
Right.
But they had given me very good service. I'm going to go over here.
Okay.
I had ordered that. Okay, a nice ammunition case on.
Oh, it
in
looks
MDF.
Great. In MDF.
That's MDF, yeah. It's MDF and bit of card for the top and the seat. The horse is metal, obviously.
Okay. I was going to say MDF horses have really come a long way. Like,
yeah, that's right.
yeah.
Well, I'd ordered this and another case on, and then when I was putting the other case, that's a little bit bigger. I noticed that this card, here, hold it up. This card strapping, you know, the reinforced strapping, was missing, and the roof was the wrong, or was missing as well. And then I started looking at the other kit, which is supposed to be this, and it was like, oh, the strapping's not even in there. Huh. And so I emailed them back. So some parts are missing. And they said, oh, no problem. And so yeah, I got, new ammunition case on and a new other tool case on. Which, cool, very, very good. Except the thing that the kit that I thought was missing parts, it was really messed up. It was this. It was a supply ammunition cart with
Right.
some bits of this, and so now I got like extra wagons, because I just took I used this bit as a template to cut out, very carefully cut out for the other case on it was missing parts, and so now I've got like 4 for the price of 2. And they're very good value. They're very good value. It's like £3.30 for the caisson, and then you order the draft horses separately, and you can order drivers separately, and it still comes up to like half the price of a metal ammunition caisson or wagon.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're good deal. They're nicely detailed. I like them. They go together very easily. And then it's been a rainy Sunday here, so I've been assembling Prussian artillery for my ongoing, because this is going to be a Prussian ammunition caisson.
Okay.
Yeah, so I've got the limber assembled, 3 guns started behind me right there. You can see I've started painting another battalion of another battalion of Prussian infantry.
Oh, there they are.
Yeah. So,
folks, we're getting an in-depth tour of James Ductworth.
Well, and I cleaned the table up for last night's game.
You did, yeah.
Yeah, because my table had gotten quite disastrous, which you'll see if you can see any of it in the background of me during the interview with Pierre-Yves.
Yes.
This has been cleaned off since, because I had to play a game, which is very cool. Scott was available. He didn't have any overtime, and he bought some 15 mil Cold War kit on eBay. And last year, and he has never played with it before. So he said, hey, let's play. I want to play with this. Okay, cool. So we worked our way through 7 days of the River Rhine, little Canadian force defending against a bigger Soviet force. Fun game. I quite liked it. It moves very quick. You're not getting worried about crunchy details about, well, I've got a laser rangefinder, but you're countering with, hot smoke and like I'm pretty sure, like, an anti-tank guided missile system is an anti-tank guided missile system, whether it's a, Sager or TOW or, there's some, some different gun factors and armor factors for the tanks, but it all moves very quick. And the heart and soul is little command chits. When you activate a tank, you put a command chit on it.
Okay. And
you can keep, and and if he does something, you can put another command chit on it to react with that tank. Except every command chit causes a negative die roll modifier for your activation.
Okay.
So you can keep the pressure on and keep activating guys, but eventually you'll fail an activation and the initiative goes to him.
Right.
And you just keep going back and forth till you're both out of command chits. Okay.
And 7 Days to the Rhine, is that the name of the rules?
Yeah, 7 Days to the River Rhine. It's from Great Escape Games.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
I've seen some of that on Twitter, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. Scott was saying that, like, pointing out that reconnaissance vehicles actually, have a purpose. Which is kind of neat. And they have, I was looking at it on their store, and there are hidden unit tokens. So obviously there are some rules for concealment in there, which we were kind of thinking was sort of missing, because of course we're deploying out in the open for everybody, and he knew where I was and I knew where he was. And, to me, that's part of the whole, modern combat is concealment, because once you're seen, you're dead. Right. So. Yeah, so it was nice getting the table cleared off, kind of cleared a bunch of cobwebs out of my head and got me going on some stuff. And
I saw on Twitter that you were using some of those lovely Faller German railroad model railroad buildings.
I have had those since, like, all the little cottages. Don Perrin gave those to me way back when, I think like 85. I think he was still a cadet at RMC, and he unloaded all his HO Napoleonic stuff, and these houses are with them. And then I bought the bigger buildings that you'll see in pictures on my blog. We used to have a Leisure World in town, and they had them on clearance, and I was like, "Ooh, let me get those because those are really nice."
They're hard to find now.
Yeah, and they're very expensive.
They are.
So it's great to get them on clearance. So I've had them for over 30 years now. Every time I do 15 mil 7 years of war, or well, now Cold War, they get out.
Were all the figures, all the toys Scott's, or was it some from your own collection?
Yeah, it was my terrain, his vehicles and troops.
Right. Yeah.
So it was all Battlefront stuff.
Right, from their Team Yankee.
Plastic Leopard tanks and plastic T-64s. So
they look fine.
Yeah, they're nice kits. They're cute. He had Carl Friedrich paint up his Canadians and fix the Warsaw Pact and West German stuff he bought used, and it kind of got damaged in shipping. So Carl fixed a bunch of it for him.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I swing back and forth on World War III. I'm glad I never had to fight it. Of course, I guess the verdict is still out on whether we could still have World War III. Just not in the 1980s, but the 2020s, which isn't very. But it's a lot of people on Twitter that you and I follow, like Tom Egan, the Irish Army officer, has been talking a lot about World War III, and he has a lot of the Team Yankee kit, which looks really good. And then he was flogging a book that, James, I think you would probably find fascinating. So I'm going to hold another book up to the camera. This is called Battle Group Lessons of the Unfought Battles of the Cold War by...
I'll have to borrow that off you.
You will. Yeah, I'll be happy to link to it. It's published by a British guy called Jim Storr, who was British Army of the Rhine for 30 plus years. And from a wargaming point of view, it's absolutely fascinating because he bases his analysis in part on his own experience with the British Army, and in the first chapter he talks about how he and his brother, who was also a British Army officer, the author Jim Storr was regular and his brother was a territorial, but they played hundreds of games. They fought and took notes on 202 tabletop battles. No, more than that, but they have notes on 202. They used the old WRG Wargames rules for armored warfare at company and battalion battle group level, 1950 to 1985.
Ooh, those are very crunchy.
Published in 1979, and he has a lot to say about what wargamers get right and what wargamers get wrong about.
That'll be interesting to know.
Stuff. He's very keen on the Bundeswehr. He says the Bundeswehr was by far probably the best army of the Cold War, specifically built on lessons from the Wehrmachts fighting the Russians. Less keen on the British. Very skeptical about the Americans. He says the Warsaw Pact probably was super overrated in terms of its numbers.
Turns out that may be right. I've got a friend in Ottawa. He's a wargamer, and he was in intelligence, and he was saying how during the Cold War they're all like, the Soviet soldiers, this 10-foot tall giant with laser eyes, and once the Iron Curtain came down, it's like, oh, it's 3 raccoons in a trench coat.
Yeah.
They're just faking us out.
Yeah, and then as we know, they've gotten just worse. I think
Well, yeah, I'm pretty sure I think their competencies in the 80s and 90s was a lot better than now.
Probably, yeah, but I'm not sure that book made me want to go out and buy a bunch of 15 mil. World War II kit or World War III kit.
Well, I'm thinking, because I've got this idea in the back of my head of the Kingdom of Mantovia.
Yes, that's right.
And their long-standing rival on their eastern border, Borduria, which of course after World War II becomes a Soviet client state.
Right.
And Mantovia gets rearmed with British equipment and American money. And they have border clashes. So, I think maybe Mantovia won't be fully part of NATO because otherwise a border clash would turn into World War III.
Right.
Or maybe I'll just say it's World War III, whatever. But it's being fought in 1952 because I want to have Centurion tanks. So, I just want an excuse to have Centurion tanks rampaging around the table and infantry with FNs.
Yeah.
And doing it in 6mm, because we used to play a lot of Cold War micro armor when I had a club here in town that met in a hobby store. And that was awful. Very, very crunchy, technical, tedious rules. There's no sense of command and control, morale, that kind of thing.
And usually whoever fired first won. The Warsaw Pact guy had to roll across the table, and then NATO unleashes hell with 30 salvos of tow missiles, and you're taking off companies at a time, right?
Yeah, and infantry just kind of disappear at that scale.
Yeah.
GHQ has these are American infantry, these are British infantry. It's like, how can you tell the difference?
Yeah.
At 6mm, just they all look the same. Actually, my group, we just used counters from board games.
That's what we did too. Yeah.
For the infantry.
Yeah.
So I know it's just very visually unappealing to me. And 10mm, everybody's going on about the Plastic Soldier Company 10mm stuff for Battle Group North Ag. And looking at the prices, I don't see a lot of cost saving with 10mm. And then have to get all new terrain.
Well, I mean,
so I might as well stay with 15mm than all my World War II terrain. I can add some high voltage pylons and a few modern buildings or whatever, but all my World War II terrain can just soldier on for yet another war.
Or your Faller HO stuff would work in a pinch with 15mm.
Oh, right? For southern Germany, yeah. And Mantovia is very much in the south. It's Bavaria, Tyrol, Alps.
Right.
It might slide over and have a little bit of the Adriatic too. The Mantovian tourist Ministry of Tourism we're really pushing the wine and cheese festivals to boost tourism.
That's right. They probably have a great Eurovision song contest entry as well.
Oh, yeah. Totally. We got 4 hot blondes.
Yeah.
And
the guy with the ukulele, and I'm sure it would be.
Well, we're not so sure about him. He's kind of embarrassing.
Yeah. And they're all wearing bell bottoms and
we're trying to find a kid with a guitar and someone who can play. But one of the blondes has potential with electric keyboard. Yeah. So we might be okay there.
Yeah. It's funny. I was painting some figures a couple of nights ago, and I listen to Apple Music on my phone sometimes, and I just I just pick something and I just let the algorithm go, and suddenly I realized I was listening to songs from a 1960s Hungarian pop album, and I had no idea what they were singing, but I thought they were kind of groovy.
Wow.
I should have snagged that album and put it on my playlist because it was kind of fun. Anyway.
Yeah.
I had one of those photos of a sexy girl in polyester pants getting on a moped, and
then some guy with a big cheesy mustache and frizzy hair.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Anyway, well, that's cool. Where's I going with that? I mean, the other thing you could do it too is, I suppose, is you could find a friend with a 3D printer, because the Henry Turner's has a range of 3D printed Cold War figures from 1950, the early Cold War. But I was going to say with Centurions, Jim Storr, the battle group guy, I'm holding this up to the microphone again. House of 3D wargaming books.
That's right. Ooh, scary, eh, kids?
He mentions the point that the Centurion actually never fired a shot in anger with the British Army.
No. Korea.
Were they Centurions or were they Shermans?
Yes.
Okay, well, I guess he got that wrong. But he said
they did sterling service in the Imjin River.
The Centurions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm going to have to look that up as we talk. But what he does say was that if you want Centurions, in combat, look at the Iranian army, because the Iranian army used them in the Iran-Iraq war. They had a lot of centurions in their order of battle.
Well, the Iran-Iraq war, like if you like eclectic selections of kit,
Yeah,
the Iran-Iraq war is the one to do,
sure.
because they started out, with all this older stuff from both sides of the Iron Curtain, and then I'm under the impression their supply actually switched. But
Yeah,
anyway, yeah, and they were just buying whatever they could and throwing it at the front, and it was just because it's what, a 10-year long war.
yeah, it was crazy.
It was just apocalyptic. It was horrible.
And we don't know anything about it.
No,
No,
no, because we've pissed off both sides. So it's not like Western historians can go in and do any research.
And it's one of those wars. I think at the time people were quite happy, with both sides losing, really.
Yes, and unfortunately, the West were backing Saddam.
Mm-hmm.
And here he is. He's throwing gas shells and stuff at the Iranians, and it's like,
yeah.
But the Iranians had the Ayatollah and the Islamic Revolution, so they're the bad guys.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, not in this case. Actually, they're being invaded.
There's a lot of bad guys to go around.
Well, yeah. I mean, the Middle East is just full of bad guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of people playing very cynical power politics chess and exploiting whoever they can to which is why I don't want to do Arab-Israeli war.
No,
because that would be the classic with centurions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, like now with the politics getting very, at least in the 60s and 70s, it was very clear, right? Young country fighting for survival, hooray, we can all get behind that. And now it's like, it's getting very murky,
Yeah, it is.
So I just want to, I'm just going to be nice, cut and dried, very, very, we'll totally fictionalize it, and I can just have nice olive drab centurions blowing up T-55s. It'll be great.
Yeah. And of course, thinking of Mantovia and Borduria, that makes me think of Tintin, right? Because
that's where I stole the name for Borduria. Yeah, I really should have come up with something else.
And their dictator, Curvy Tash.
Yeah, I should have come up with something else.
No, just steal it.
It sounded very Eastern European.
It's good. It's absolutely good. And I mean, those were great. I should really go out and read those again, because I remember the Bordurians had a bunch of German kit, right? And I think there's one point where Tintin steals like an ME-109 or something. And, very cool, as one does.
Well, and Mantovia and Borduria were both absorbed into the Reich in 1936.
Right.
So, the German staff officers had to keep Bordurian and Mantovian troops garrisoned separate from each other, or they would fight.
Of course, yeah. Wow.
There's a deep, rich history here.
Oh, there is.
I'm waiting for the Ospreys to be put out right after Ukrainian tractors of 2022.
That's right. Yeah. Or failed mattress modifications to Russian tanks. Those cages that they put on the roofs of their tanks. Yeah, that would be great. Well, what can I natter about? I want to natter tonight about playing a really old game that I never really tried before. So, as I mentioned on Twitter last week, I went to what passes for our local War Games club, and there's a guy called Charles that I've gotten chummy with, and Charles and I are a little more old school in some ways. So a lot of the guys at the club are sort of the new shiny let's play it thing. So and the store owner, God bless him, is quite happy to feed their appetites, right? So the last few weeks, everybody's been excited about that samurai game, Test of Honor.
Okay, well, it's not exactly new shiny.
Well, it's new shiny to them, and it's I don't know how long it's been out, but
2 years.
Yeah, okay, whatever. I played it once. It was kind of fun, and if you like Kurosawa samurai movies, that was fun. But or they're playing Black Seas, the Warlord games with the sailing ships, and
okay, yeah.
And Charles and I are willing to try Clash of Arms or Clash of Spears, which is the ancient skirmish game that they're playing. But you know, I said to him, well, what else do you like to play? And he said, well, I'm kind of old school, and I used to play a lot of DBA. And I said, well, why don't you teach me? I'll show up next week. So, you know, Charles showed up, and the as I was, you know, saying, we were talking to Chris. You know, I've seen the DBA tournaments at HotLead, but it's not something you watch really, right?
Yeah.
And so there was like a little bit of felt that we marked. He marked out the playing area with some green painter's tape, and then he had a, you know, a toolkit, and he took out these two battered 15 mil armies that had been, you know, had the crap played out of them, and they're well loved figures. Crusader army and Byzantine army, and the terrain was a little bit of battered green felt for a couple of forests, and a little hill made out of, you know, two bits of box board with a little bit of flocking sprinkled on them, and they looked exactly like two bits of cut out box board. You know,
Yeah, this is your classic DBA tournament setup.
yeah, where you don't really give a crap about the
Yeah, it's just supposed to be transportable, go down fast,
yeah.
get moved around fast for the next game setup, and you know,
And
you're
I
not
think
spending all
that's
night.
probably what Phil Barker wanted, right? He wanted a game that could be played in a pub. Um,
Yeah.
and you know, having since gone down a big YouTube rabbit hole about DBA videos, I know there's people
Oh.
have theories about how to make your DBA game look pretty, and that's fine. But the idea that you just have 12 units and that's it was really interesting, because you can get your head around that. And
Yeah, some army lists, there's there's alternates that you can swap out.
yep.
You know, so if you want to do the complete army, you end up having to build like 15 units maybe.
Yeah.
So
And as I think I've said before, I have been flirting with a set of rules called ADLG, which is I guess that would be a successor to one of the bigger DBA variants like DBM or something, where you've got armies divided into three wings. But it's the same basic idea that you get so many impetus points or command points or whatever you want to call them, and you have to allocate them if you want to move or fight a unit. And the more your battle line gets fragmented, the less control you have over it, which is probably very very accurate. And then a lot of it is just, you know, very much, it's very abstract. It's, you know, flanking and so forth, and massing units, and very familiar, if, you know, to somebody like me who grew up playing hex and counter games. But I had a lot of fun.
well, good. I mean, it's I've played it a few times, and I should probably revisit it, because you know, then I got really heavily into ancients and got really into a lot of the details and stuff, and DBA was just, you know, too abstract for me, and too, you know, and the tournament play aspect still bugs me.
Yeah.
You know, because to me, armies don't evolve in a vacuum.
No.
They evolve in response to their opponents and the terrain they're fighting across. So, you know, having these ahistorical tournament matchups kind of, and I know some tournaments are very much sort of all, you know, the theme is biblical, or the theme is Rome and its enemies, or the theme is the Middle Ages, and then at least you're kind of people at roughly the same technology levels, and
right,
you know, that kind of thing, which, you know, is a way to alleviate it. But what I think it's really cool for is campaign games.
Yeah.
Right, for resolve, you know, you have your map board of whatever, and you resolve you know, you're moving your army counters around, then you resolve the battles on a little DBA setup, and then you can play a campaign in like an afternoon.
Yeah.
You know, you can play the Year of the Four Emperors in an afternoon, and that's, to me, that's a really exciting idea.
Right.
Wim Wordshorn, who used to run games at HotLead when it was down the hill at the Victorian Inn, he had one called Protector of the Realm, which was basically Kingmaker, but he did a really nice big board, and, you know, instead of a little county, he had like nice little, you know, 1200 cogs for the naval units, and you moved your armies around, and you had kind of a modified DBA for resolving the battles. And you had very nice little terrain tiles with beautiful little terrain pieces. And you weren't always fighting 12 elements, because of course with Kingmaker you're building bigger armies and followings and all that kind of stuff. So you might have an asymmetrical battle.
Right.
But it was a little nicer than the very cut and dried, kind of nasty way of resolving battles when you play Kingmaker.
Yeah.
So, but it was a beautiful game. Like Wim's really put a lot of thought into the aesthetics of it. And it was one question with the DBA scene is I can't understand why 25mm isn't bigger with DBA. And somebody was saying it is because new 28mm figures don't fit on a 60mm wide base.
Yeah, I think that could be.
And then some people say, well, we just use 80mm wide elements then, and use our bigger scale 28mm figures, and it works fine. Which probably would.
You'd have to double the playing area, I guess.
Or
enlarge it, but I suppose that would.
But I mean, if I was going to do it, be dedicated DBA, I'd have, I'd posh up my terrain.
Yeah,
I'd have a nice little tote with my nice little terrain elements and hills and forest elements and stuff. And
well, that's where something like a cigar box battle mat would come in handy, right?
Yeah.
Like why play on a piece of felt if you could get a nice little battle mat? But the thing that I find interesting about it, partly it's just as I get older, we've talked before about how as we get older we start liking simpler rules.
That's why I like 7 Days in River Rhine.
Yeah, but the idea that you could throw an army together really quickly. So, one of the things I love about Wargamers is that we tend to be pretty generous. And when I mentioned that I was interested in DBA, somebody else in the group said, "Well, I've got these War of the Roses figures."
Oh, there you go.
I don't really want them, so would you like them? And I said, "How much do you want?" And he said, "No, you can have them." So, like, I've got a little Wars of the Roses army in a box here. And these are just a bunch of hobbler guys, I guess. They look like they're wearing tin pots on their heads, and they've got ears. But these would be good, probably up into like they would do the Wars of the Roses. I could paint them up as an Italian city-states army from the 15th century. And when you only need 12 bases, and if you're doing it in 15s, you could paint an army pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, guys would, like there are some guys, they've got all kinds of armies because they just, let's do, this is the army I'm interested in right now. So let's do, these guys and then you can get that nice little sampler. It's kind of like tapas for wargaming.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Or dim sum.
I just don't want to eat the chicken feet. Yeah. Yeah, well,
but I can certainly I can certainly see the appeal in that.
Yeah.
Instead of, oh my God, I've got 3,000, Napoleonic Russians to paint to finish my army.
Oh, who would be that crazy?
Well, I don't have 3,000. I've only got a couple of hundred or so.
3,000. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's good to have the big projects and then the small projects, right? So.
Yeah. Which is why I've got you printing World War II chips for me.
I have finished all the Americans, I think, as of tonight.
Oh, anchors away, boys!
No, I could
love a sailor.
I could do all three. I could do all three variants of the Fletcher destroyers, but I think you're just going to get one.
All three? There were 3 variants in the file? I didn't.
Yeah, the file you sent me, when you open it up, it has 3 different kinds of Fletchers.
Oh.
So I don't know.
I didn't know the Fletcher had different variants, but
I don't know honestly if you'd look at them if you could tell, but I will probably do all 3 for you if I have time. But yeah, they look so tempting, and sometimes they make me think I would like to find some STL files for World War I dreadnoughts, or Russo-Japanese pre-dreadnoughts. I mean,
I know some of the. Well, in the place I got the files for you, he's got some older. He's got a lot of newer stuff too, but still that Wargaming 3D. There's guys on there that have got American Civil War ships. Probably if you look for World War I dreadnoughts.
Oh, they're out there. I found
them.
Or
pre-dreadnoughts, you'd find them. Yeah, some of those ships are pretty wacky.
They are. I just haven't downloaded them because
when hotels went to war.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah,
let's have 10 different calibers of gun on our ship.
that's right. Yeah,
You know,
and yeah, and then French designs in particular from the 1890s, like let's have circular hulls, or let's have rams. Let's
yeah.
let's put a ram on a dreadnought, pre-dreadnought, because it's fun.
Well, that's that was all because of the Battle of Lissa it was between the Italians and the Austrians in the 1860s,
Right.
where there was a successful ram,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a very devastating attack. I think because the ship that was attacked wasn't armored. So everybody will, wow, steamships with ram bows is the hot new thing.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So oh well. Although I've just been reading let's see, it's Rising Star Setting Sun, the Guadalcanal Campaign from November 42 until 43.
Oh yes.
The I can't remember the name of the first volume, which I read last year,
Mm-hmm.
which got me thinking about destroyers. And so the first naval battle of Guadalcanal, the American admiral didn't understand. He didn't understand the capabilities of his radar,
Mm-hmm.
and not all of his ships had the surface search radar.
Right.
So they weren't using it very well, and it was a very dark, overcast night, and so the Japanese lookouts couldn't see the American fleet, and so these guys were like right on top of each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it was destroyers in the lead, and then they're like, holy shit, that's a Japanese battleship like 2,000 yards away, can we please open fire? And the American admiral unfortunately was very hesitant and wasn't sure what was going on, so he's being way too cautious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it was like a drunken fight in a darkened bar. Like these ships were just like the squadrons were just going right through each other, and this one Japanese destroyer got off a torpedo attack on a American cruiser, and the Japanese captain says, and I heard the 4 thunks as my torpedoes hit the hull, and I was like, oh, you idiot, we fired too close. Like they were that close, the torpedoes didn't have time to arm. Like they were, American destroyers were like frantically getting out of the way before they got run over by these Japanese heavy battleships and cruisers. And yeah, they're just fighting for their lives. They got punished horribly, although they did stop the Japanese reinforcement convoy from getting to Guadalcanal. So it was a bit of a bit of a Pyrrhic victory.
It's an amazing campaign because the American Navy is incredibly resilient, right? I mean, they get
Yes.
pounded, and they come back every time, and they learn.
Right? Yeah, and like and the writer of the book I'm reading, he talks about how the Japanese combined fleet, with the Yamato, is sitting in Truk Harbor, and Yamato was getting referred to by the Japanese Navy as the hotel, because it's just sitting there. It's the biggest freaking warship in the world, and it's just parked. And Yamamoto is sitting in his cabin writing haiku, because he's like, no, we are waiting for the decisive battle with the American Navy. And it's like, no, the decisive battle is happening in the Solomons around Guadalcanal.
Yeah,
like you just aren't realizing it, and the Americans were.
But
they just kept coming back. It was a total intelligence failure on the part of the Japanese.
But do you take your battleship into an island chain where there's relatively little room to maneuver, and where
go south?
Yeah.
Right. Go out. You don't go down the slot. You go to the south, or you go to the north, and like
and then they're concerned about the fact the Americans still have an airfield capability, right? So
yeah, Henderson Field became the unsinkable carrier, just like Midway.
Yeah.
And the Americans were very quick in realizing that we have to push aircraft and aviation fuel onto Henderson Field.
Yeah.
even though the Japanese are still on the north end of the island trying to contest control.
Right.
And they lost the Hornet and they lost the Wasp.
Yeah.
And it was like, right, those air group, any plane that can still fly or is still in the air, go to Guadalcanal
Yeah.
and reinforce the air group. And so they had this massive air group that extended their air cover, and so they were.
Right. And you have pilots flying off Guadalcanal who are suffering from dysentery and on half rations. And,
Oh yeah,
it's like it's an unbelievable story.
Yeah, the commander of the air group was saying, we're trying to fly like pilots, but when we're not in the air, we're living like infantry.
Yeah,
They're dugouts with ponchos over top.
Yeah,
and it's not very restful.
No, it's pretty impressive. I'm trying to remember the name of a book I read about Guadalcanal a couple of years ago. It was
Neptune's Inferno.
No, maybe it was by it had a name like something Scheim. It was a 3-volume set. What was the author of the book you were reading?
Oh goodness, I can't remember.
Oh,
it's way over on my bookshelf.
Anyway, I'll have to look it up. But it was just an epic story, the Guadalcanal story. Goodness, so
yeah, I kind of think it was the decisive naval battle.
Yeah.
Like it really turned things, and the Americans learned a lot of really hard lessons, and then they came out of that, when they get to the Marshall Islands and the Philippine Sea and Leyte Gulf. It's like they're firing on all cylinders, and they're just kicking the Japanese around the houses because they know what they're doing now. And then you have things like Taffy 33, which was like a bunch of escort carriers and some destroyers, right? And they're up in the north, providing air cover and flank security for the invasion fleet on the Philippines. And then it's like, oh, here comes, some battleships and heavy cruisers and all this scary crap coming in to try and, be like wolves amongst the sheep with the invasion convoy. And and the command, the destroyer captain's just like, right, like, make smoke screens, fire off all your torpedoes whenever you get a target, and just zoom around and fire shells. And these jeep carriers like launched everything, and they just harassed the crap out of it, and the Japanese commanders thought they were facing a much bigger opponent, and they turned around and left.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the Japanese naval commanders are very cautious.
Yeah, well, I think after Midway, you learn that a really bad day is a really, really bad day, right? You lose your capital assets and your strategic capability in 3 pyres of smoke as your prize carriers are exploding around you, and you're like, what the hell? This did not go well.
Yeah, where the Americans could, we have, let's get our damaged carrier back to Pearl Harbor, or if we have to, San Francisco, and it's back at sea in a couple of months.
Yeah. I couldn't help think as I read this book on Guadalcanal, and I really wish that I could remember the name of it, but it wasn't Neptune's Inferno, I don't think. But I wonder how many U.S. naval officers are studying Guadalcanal in light of what a war with China would look like, because it seems to me there's all sorts of analogies. Anyway, I'll
I don't know. But when it comes to like the big thing with with the Guadalcanal the Solomon Islands campaign is logistics.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole Japanese effort was trying to reinforce their troops on Guadalcanal, and they couldn't bring in big transports. They tried that, and they lost 8 out of 13 transports and 5,000 men.
Yes, it's staggering.
To American airstrikes, because of course Henderson Field was only an hour away.
Right.
Like these guys would fly off, bomb the Japanese, land, go. They're flying like 5-8 sorties a day.
Yeah.
And then the 5 ships that did land supplies, the Americans bombed the beaches and blew up all the supplies.
Yeah.
Like 50, they only got 50 tons of supplies to their army on Guadalcanal.
Yeah.
And so they're trying, okay, well, let's run in with destroyers carrying troops. And there's this Admiral Tanaka who commanded a destroyer division. And he was like, this is a bad idea because we're burning a lot of fuel for very little return. But it was the only way to get reinforcements and supplies in, because, you know, submarines couldn't do it because they're too small and barges are too slow. And, you know, like it was just, and it was the American air power keeping, you know, limiting the Japanese resupply efforts.
Right.
You know, and the Americans on the ground saying, we need aircraft, we need aviation fuel, and yeah, like, because we have to keep these guys on the ropes.
Right. And that would be true of a war over Taiwan, right? Whichever side loses control of the seas can't supply either the defense or the offense, right? So the Chinese could land a force on Taiwan, and then if they lose the control of the airs and seas, then they can't reinforce them, right? Or vice versa.
Well, exactly.
Vice versa, the Americans can't send reinforcements to Taiwan. It's all over. So, yeah, interesting. Hope it doesn't happen, to be perfectly honest. But
well, yeah, I think the Chinese are, I mean, you know, we're their market, right?
yeah,
They go to war with us, and suddenly they're not selling anything.
no,
Their economy falls apart.
yeah,
So,
and they have to be watching the situation in Ukraine as well, right? I would think.
yeah, their support for Russia seems to have really backed off,
Right.
gotten very cool.
Yeah, and they're also learning what a motivated defense can look like in the 21st century, right? Yeah.
Yes, I really hope the Canadian Air Forces is looking at, you know, drones.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, drones flying off of ships, drones flying in support of tanks. Like,
Yeah.
you know, considering you got, like, you know, Ukrainian, you know, volunteer groups, you know, with their civilian drones, and they're modifying them, and they're like 3D printing fins to go onto grenades.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So they can drop them like aerial bombs, like right through the sunroof of a car filled with Russian soldiers. It was like, that's amazing.
That was a really bad day for those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's really brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, good signals intelligence. You see the video of the artillery strike on the Russian headquarters?
Yes. Yeah, I wasn't sorry. You know, a bunch of Russian generals got killed. So very sad. Very sad.
I mean, you know, maybe those guys are happy because it ended the PowerPoint early.
Yeah, I know.
You know, all right, comrades, here's my plan for continuing the war. You know, slide 1 of 350.
That's right. Yeah.
And then, you know, the explosion starts, and like, oh, thank God.
Yeah. Thank God.
Just jump into the slit. Let's try and run for the slit trenches.
That's
and
right.
You know,
I'd rather have death from Ukrainians than death from PowerPoint. Yeah. All right. Well, this is probably a good point to start wrapping up. You've got possibly 3,000 Prussians still to paint.
No, Prussians, I've only got, after these boys, I've only got 1 box with a couple, and, you know, there's a couple extra sprues of command. So that'll give me 3 more battalions. So 3 battalions of Prussian musketeers, and then a 6-figure group of the volunteer Jaegers that come with the Perry plastic set. And then I've got 12 battalions of Russian infantry and 6 Russian artillery pieces. So a little bit more.
Yeah.
You know, but these are only 16-figure battalions, not 36 or 48-figure battalions, because I honestly can't see the point in, I mean, that's why I like 16-figure battalions, because it's bulky enough that it looks like a battalion.
Right.
Like 12-figure battalions are a little thin. You know, although I certainly play with them with my 7 Years War stuff, because that's what War and Warfare Reason told us to do, and Empire told me to do that too. Like 12 are a little thin.
Yeah.
But like 24 is just it's too big. And, you know, these guys that do 36 and 48-figure battalions, it's like, are like, what are you trying to prove, buddy?
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh well, you know, if it's got to have both colors and it's got to have, you know, the grenadier and the light company. It's like, well, okay, that's cool. I guess. But if you're playing a set of rules that is, you know, based on stands,
right?
You know, if you're not worrying about number of figures firing and removing figure casualties, then like, you know, 16 is nice. You got 4 stands, so you can be in, you know, column, attack column, square, line. You know, whether it's got 4 figures on it or 6 or 8.
Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter at all.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah,
you know, and those extra figures are just extra effort. They take up a lot of real estate.
Yeah.
Scots Napoleonics used to be organized in battalions of 24 and 36 for the Austrians.
Yeah.
And it just took up way too much real estate on this and I've got a big table, you know, as you can see behind me.
Yeah.
It was very awkward maneuvering these massive units around, where, you know, I convinced him to let's scale it down to 16 because that's all I'm going to paint is 16 figure battalions.
Yeah.
So he's done that too. When he brings his French over to fight me, he brings 16 figure units, and it fits better, works better on the table.
I think depending on the period, you know, the number of figures on a base is, you know, a Mass Effect does look good. So this is like a stand of.
Yes, you're Prussian.
So I'm trying to work 6 guys to a base. Just because I think
that base.
It's 50 millimeter square, I think.
Okay, see, I put 2 cavalrymen on a 50.
Yeah, and I would put 250. I would put 2 cavalry on the same base. So for all for my 7 years war stuff, I have a standard base size. So this is my base size.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of I could put 1 gun or 6 infantry or 2 cavalry on the base.
It works.
The rules I'm using, like I think most rules now, it's just how many dice per base do you get depending on what formation it's in. Like a Sam Mustava style game, if you've got, if you've got 4 bases in line, then they would get so many dice per base. But if they're in column or mass, then it's the number of dice per base is reduced.
Yeah.
And that's fine. It's just a question of how many figures do you want to get a satisfying aesthetic, right?
And that's why I based the way I did, because 4 on a 40 by 40. Kind of used that with my medieval stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, I could just use 2 bases for a group of 8 for sharp practice.
Yeah, exactly.
I'll do my, you know, like for my Bavarian infantry, the light companies are just 3 guys on a base, so they're a little more irregular and skirmishy. And going and I grab 2 light companies, and I have a group of 6 skirmishers for sharp practice. So
yeah,
you know, that's just.
And then all you need are some individual base figures for.
I cream out extra command, you know, NCOs and officers for big men. Yeah,
there you go. Well, my friends, we're going to wrap up at this point. We are looking forward to. So it's been a month since we released a Canadian Wargamer podcast in the wild. So I should have this ready in a couple of days. So I wanted to apologize to our guest, Pierre-Yves.
Yes,
because being during the interview, I think I was referring to him as JP, because I was probably confusing him with a guy I used to know in the military called Jean-Pierre. Everybody called him JP. So sorry, Monsieur Troel, but that was a great guest and a great interview, and we're really glad we had him. I'm not sure what our interviews are like going forward, but I have a couple in mind, and we'll say more about them in the future. So by the next podcast, we'll have finished LardEh in Hamilton, and we'll talk about that. I'm gonna spend this month getting my General d'Armée scenario ready, and I'm gonna try to take it to the club in Barrie and run it a few times, so I'm more confident.
Nice.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, because you haven't. Have you game mastered it?
No, I am a game master virgin.
Ooh.
Yeah, but I
mean, it's a friendly crowd at LardEh.
Yeah, they are. Yeah, and I'm on sabbatical now for the summer, and the only thing that's cut into my painting time, James, is a little 4-legged puppy.
Oh, Brody. Yeah.
Brody the pupster. But he's a lot of fun. But he does. It's like having an infant in the house. It's You know, it's
were there
quiet.
no
It's too quiet. What are you chewing on? Are you pooping? You know. So anyway,
were there no mature dogs that needed rescuing?
we wanted a puppy, and you know what? Puppies are fun. It's
Oh, okay. I just, there's a reason why older guys like us don't become fathers of infant, or at least smart older guys.
unless we have
Rich ones who can afford nannies.
yeah, and you're going to afford supermodel wives young enough to be their daughters
Yeah, yeah. They can afford to be a father at our age,
because
but
they can probably afford alimony as well for their three
yeah,
previous wives. Yeah.
yeah. The rest of us though, who have to like get up and clean up after these little people and have the energy to chase them around and give them all the love and attention.
Well,
Um,
you're going to get that when you see your grandkids. I'm happy for you, man.
well, that's why I think I might be too exhausted to drive to Hamilton the day after.
Well, yeah. Okay.
So, you can tell me about LardEh and I can tell you about grandchildren.
I will. And we have not yet done the prize draw for our Bob Merch Ukrainian Cossack simply because I just haven't been organized. So friends, we're going to give you, the listener, just a few more chances to leave a comment telling us that you listen to us and that you'd like some of these figures. And you can leave a comment either on our Facebook page or on our YouTube page or on, you can just email us. There's lots of places to find us. And yeah, we'll do a draw next time, and that'll be exciting. We have, we don't ask you guys for anything. We do this podcast for fun. It's kind of a passion project, and we'll never stick our hand out for money. But we would just appreciate it if you would tell us that you listen to us, and we'd also appreciate it if you tell somebody else that you listen to the Canadian Wargamer podcast. And yeah, spread the word. If you are from another part of Canada and you got really upset when Chris Robinson said, I don't know anything about what's happening in Western or Eastern Canada, tell us what you're doing.
Yeah,
ask us to come on the show. Tell us about your event. And
that's what we're here for.
yeah, yeah. So we're like shining a big old
Like it'd be beauty, eh?
beauty. Yeah, like we're shining a big old spotlight on you. Ace. All right. Okay. So this is a good night for me.
Good night for me.
All right. Take care, folks. We'll
Take off, hosers.
take off. Eh? We'll let the music play us out. All right. Okay. I'll pause this.